So hey anime fans. The series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Pokemon? So let's start the series. The Fractured Sky. The air didn't just smell of ozone and crushed stone. It tasted of it, metallic, sharp, a dry tang that clung to the back of Naruto's throat like a promise of lightning. One moment, he was falling through a darkness that pulsed with the afterimage of a desperate, botched oration, the screaming chakra of a dozen clashing Kage-level techniques still buzzing in his bones like shattered glass. The next, his boots slammed into cracked earth, the impact jarring up his spine with the finality of a coffin lid shutting, and a sound he'd never heard before split the world in two. It wasn't a roar. It was a shriek of pure, tectonic grief. A sound so vast and wounded it seemed to originate in the planet's core and tear its way out through the atmosphere. The sky above was not the sky he knew. It was a bruised, swirling palette of violet and angry amber, lit from within by jagged, golden contrails that lanced downward. Each beam struck the ground with a concussive thump that vibrated through the soles of his feet and up into his teeth. This wasn't a battle. It was the world having a seizure. He was on a cliff's edge, granite biting into his palms where he'd caught himself. Below, a valley lay in ruins. Not the ruins of a village, smoke, fire, shattered wood, but something older, more profound. Ancient, moss-covered stone structures, a temple complex of elegant arches and monolithic pillars, were being uprooted from the earth. Not by machinery or manpower, but by raw, visible force. Psychic energy, pink and violent as an open wound, rippled in waves from a central point, lifting multi-ton blocks of sacred stone as if they were driftwood and dashing them against the cliffsides. The very geography was being rewritten by pain. And at the heart of the pain were the creatures. His mind, a veteran's catalog of threats, summons, tailed beasts, Edo Tensei, stuttered, trying to categorize them. Failed. A towering, humanoid form of blue-gray stone, seams of magmalite glowing at its joints, slammed a fist the size of a house into the valley floor. The earth didn't just crack, it petaled open in a silent, slow-motion bloom of destruction, a shockwave pulverizing a hillside into dust. A sleek, draconic horror of black and red, adorned with golden ribs that seemed to pierce reality itself, moved with the grace of a living shadow. Its wings were tattered space-time, and where its claws passed, the air wept jagged, colorless tears. But the source, the keening heart of the storm, was the serpent. Majestic, nightmare graceful, its body a stream of polished obsidian and mother of pearl, a crescent moon crest glowing on its forehead. It hung in the air, coils undulating in psychic agony, and its shriek was the psychic torrent, a visible, distorting wave of pink energy that bent light, twisted stone, and scraped directly against the soul. People were down there. Small, ant-like figures in matching blue uniforms, shouting orders that were swallowed by the cacophony. They had creatures of their own, smaller, diverse, some canine, some avian, some elemental. They fought. Flames, lightning, gales of razor wind streaked toward the titans. The attacks splashed harmlessly against the stone giant's shins, dissipated in the shadow dragon's aura, or were batted aside by the psychic serpent's distress as one might sweat a gnat. It was a rout. A systematic, hopeless dismantling of resistance. He saw a fox-like creature, elegant and white, take a glancing blow from a fragment of hovering stone and go down, its trainer diving to shield it with their own body. Naruto's body moved before his mind could form a coherent question. The instinct was older than reason, deeper than strategy. Protect the ones about to be crushed. He didn't know these people. He didn't know this place. The architecture was alien, the energy signatures all wrong, the very air pressure felt different. But the scent of desperate fear, the visual grammar of overwhelming power about to stamp out the weak, it was a language his soul had been forced to fluency in since the day he was born. He didn't run down the winding path. He pushed chakra to the soles of his feet and leaped, a streak of orange and blonde against the violent sky, arcing over the valley like a fallen sun. The wind, thick and resistant, ripped at his jacket. The strange, dense energy of this world pressed against his senses, a tangible weight that fought his chakra's flow. It felt like swimming through syrup laced with static. He gritted his teeth, focusing. The Rasengan was a thought away, a familiar turmoil in his palm. A golden beam, not from the sun but from the weeping sky, lanced down with malignant intent. Its target, the cluster of fallen responders and the downed, white fox. There was no time for finesse for assessment. Naruto dropped like a meteoric verdict between the light and the lives. Rasengan! The whirling sphere of compressed, spiraling chakra met the beam of foreign, annihilating energy. There was no colossal, fiery explosion. Instead, a horrific, grating screech filled the air, the sound of two fundamental, incompatible truths tearing at each other's throats. The Rasengan didn't dispel the beam, it diverted it, the golden energy shearing off in a spray of lethal sparks that vaporized a nearby standing stone into a cloud of superheated silica. The backlash wasn't physical force, but a wave of psychic static, a headache of pure wrongness that spiked behind his eyes and rattled his molars. He skidded back, boots gouging twin trenches in the ancient, sacred soil, his arms trembling from the strain of holding two realities apart. Silence. Sudden, stark, and profoundly unnerving. The cacophony of destruction paused. The stone giant's glowing red eyes, like banked volcanic pits, swiveled from the ruined hillside to him. The shadow dragon's head, a crown of golden horns, turned with serpentine precision. The psychic serpent's agony-filled eyes, pools of cosmic cold and personal misery, fixed on the new variable. The pink waves of distortion stilled around it, coiling like startled vipers. From the haze of dust and shimmering energy to his left, a figure emerged. She moved with a calm that was utterly dissonant with the chaos, a single point of stillness in a maelstrom. A woman, tall and poised, with a waterfall of pale blonde hair that seemed to capture and reflect the aberrant light. She wore a tailored black dress and boots, elegant yet ruthlessly functional, and her gray eyes were not on the legendary threats, but on him. They were sharp, analytical, missing nothing: the garish orange jacket, the whisker-like marks on his cheeks, the battle-hardened stance that screamed of 1,000 conflicts in a war fought by different rules. Her gaze was an assessment, a cold, swift calculation of a new and unpredictable factor. "Who are you?" Her voice was level, controlled, yet it carried an edge of tempered steel, the absolute authority of one accustomed to command. It wasn't a friendly question. It was a demand for data. "Uzumaki Naruto!" he yelled back, the introduction wrote, his own eyes darting between the three frozen titans. His heart hammered a war drum rhythm against his ribs. "What the hell is this? What are these things?" "Cynthia," she offered, the name a data point, not a greeting. "They are Pokemon. Legendary Pokemon. And you are disrupting a highly volatile equilibrium." Her gaze flicked to the fading blue energy of his Rasengan, then back to his face, searching. "Your energy, it's foreign. It doesn't belong here. It's agitating them on a fundamental level." Before he could process that, "Pokemon? Legendary?" the stone giant roared. The sound was less a noise and more a localized earthquake. Its anger had a new, fascinating focus. The intrusion. The alien spark. It pulled back a fist, and the air around it compressed with a subsonic whine that made Naruto's ears pop. "Giratina, Phantom Force! Now!" Cynthia's command cut through the settling dust, clear and precise. The shadow dragon, Giratina, hissed, a sound of rending fabric, and its form dissolved into a ripple of distorted space before vanishing entirely. The giant's fist, a moving mountain, swung through the empty air it had occupied. The shockwave alone flattened a stand of ancient pines half a mile away. An instant later, Giratina rematerialized inside the giant's guard, its spectral wings flaring, a blast of ghostly, chilling power slamming into the stone chest. Not to damage, Naruto saw, but to push. To reposition. The giant, Regigigas, stumbled back one colossal, world-shaking step. Simultaneously, a weird, keystone-like object at Cynthia's belt glowed with an eerie amethyst light. "Spiritome, bind its shadow! Hypnosis field!" From the keystone erupted a sinister, swirling cloud of 108 distinct, glowing eyes, set in a vortex of gaseous malice. It was a living nightmare. It wove chains of tangible darkness around Regigigas' tree-trunk legs and emanated a faint, drowsy aura that pressed against the giant's furious will. It was a holding action. A stunningly coordinated, precarious ballet of containment. And through it all, Cynthia never fully looked away from Naruto. "They are not inherently malicious," she stated, her voice carrying over the grunts of the titans. "They are in pain. This site, the Temple of Balance, has been violated. Their slumber was poisoned. They are lashing out." Her eyes narrowed, and in that moment she looked less like a warrior and more like a furious scholar whose pristine experiment had been contaminated. "And your arrival, with that wild, screaming energy, feels like another violation. It's a dissonant note in a song that was already off-key." Naruto's mind raced, adrenaline and confusion warring. Shinobi instinct screamed a simple algorithm: neutralize the biggest threat. Isolate, strike with overwhelming force, create an opening. But this was a different language. Cynthia's method was a complex dialogue of types and effects, of using one monster's strength to check another's, of containment over destruction. It was control through understanding, a patience he associated with medics and interrogators, not frontline fighters. His way was a bomb in a surgery theater. Necessary sometimes, but always messy. The psychic serpent, Cresselia, turned its full, devastating attention to him. Its grief and rage, he realized now, were a tangible, suffocating miasma that predated his arrival. It was the source of the storm. But his chakra, his sudden, screaming existence in this space, was a lightning strike in a room full of fumes. Its mind, vast and wounded, reached for his. Not to attack, but to comprehend, to scan this sudden, painful anomaly. He felt the pressure, cool and immense, and attempt to gently pry. To a consciousness accustomed to the soft, empathic touch of Pokemon telepathy, a language of shared emotion and imagery, Naruto's mental landscape was a fortress. Its walls were forged from the loneliness of 1,000 empty ramen bowls scarred by the betrayal of a trusted teacher, and vibrating with the seething, contained fury of the Ninetales, a hatred so old and pure it was a geological feature. The psychic probe touched the outer walls of that fortress, brushed against the intricate, forbidding geometry of the 8 trigrams seal, and rebounded. Not a gentle push. A violent, psychic ricochet. Cresselia recoiled as if physically scalded, its beautiful, crystalline head whipping back. A new shriek tore from it, this one layered with confusion, violation, and fresh, incandescent pain. The recoil didn't just stop, it amplified, reverberating back into Cresselia's own psychic torrent. The resulting feedback pulse was visible, a concussive shockwave of pink and gold energy that didn't expand outward, but inward, then outward again, slamming into the already groaning central ruins. The main monolith, a pillar 3 stories tall covered in intricate, spiraling carvings of an ancient, geometric script, let out a groan like a dying leviathan. Deep fissures, glowing with the same sickly gold as the sky beams, raced up its side with the sound of a continent tearing apart. Cynthia's preternatural calm shattered. Her composure cracked, revealing the raw, professional dread beneath. Her gray eyes widened, locked on the pillar. All her focus, all her champion's poise, was consumed by that falling stone. The scripture pillar! No! She wasn't looking at the legends anymore. It's not just a monument. It's a keystone. A lock for what sleeps beneath. Naruto followed her gaze, the shinobi part of him recognizing purpose in ancient patterns. The script, it had flow intent. It was a lock. A seal. And his chakra, his very presence, had just provided the final, catastrophic shock to break it. The consequence of his risky intervention crashed down. He hadn't just joined a battle. He'd escalated it. He turned a desperate containment operation into a potential, world-altering cataclysm. The ground beneath the temple complex began to glow. Not with Cresselia's pain or the sky's anger, but with a deep, cold, subterranean blue. It was the light of something profoundly old, and utterly other. A low hum vibrated up through the soles of his boots, a frequency that made his bones ache and his fillings sing. The air grew thicker, heavier, saturated with a dormant power stirring from a timeless slumber. It was the opposite of chakra. Chakra was life, spirit, will. This was the absence of choice. The inevitability of law. Regigigas bellowed, but the tone had changed, from rage to something like recognition and a deep, rumbling dread. It ceased its struggle against Spiritome's binds. Giratina coiled back, its red eyes fixed on the glowing earth, a wary, territorial hiss escaping it. Even Cresselia's all-consuming grief was momentarily overshadowed by a spike of primal alarm. The human responders below froze, their faces etched with a terror that transcended the immediate battle. This was beyond their manuals. This was myth waking up. Cynthia's head snapped back to Naruto. All pretense of detached analysis was gone. Her face was pale, her lips a thin, bloodless line. In her gray eyes he saw the full weight of her responsibility, the stability of a region resting on her shoulders, and the dawning, horrified realization of his role in its unraveling. "What?" she asked, the word flat, quiet, and deadly as a honed blade. "Are you?" It wasn't a question about his name. It was a question about his nature. His ontology. An accusation and a plea wrapped in one. Naruto had no answer that would fit in this broken world. He could only watch as the glowing fissures in the ground connected, forming a sinister, pulsating circuit diagram across the temple floor. The blue light pulsed, slow and rhythmic, like the heartbeat of a machine never meant to live. Above them, the torn, swirling sky reacted. The clash of purple and amber clouds convulsed, then began to spiral not around Cresselia, but around a new central point directly above the glowing temple floor. The air pressure plummeted, his ears popping again. A wind rose, howling as it was sucked into the forming vortex, pulling dust and debris upward in a macabre reverse snowfall. Then, with a sensation that was less a sound and more a sudden, profound absence of everything, the sky ripped. Not with light, but with a deeper black than the void between stars. An absolute null. A tear in the canvas of reality itself. And from that starless black, something began to descend. It was not a creature. It was a shape. Geometric, perfect, and utterly chilling. A giant, inverted pyramid, each face etched in the same cold blue light as the ground. It hovered silently, its lowest point aimed at the earth like a dagger poised for a planet's heart. From its apex, tendrils of null energy, anti-light, dripped downward. Where they touched the concept of space, it didn't tear or burn, it simply unexisted, leaving brief, perfect voids that snapped shut with thunderclaps of imploding air. A deep, resonant tone echoed from it, a single note that bypassed the ears and vibrated directly in the soul. It was a sound of profound emptiness. A hunger that had slept for millennia, not for matter, but for the quiet it remembered before the noisy accident of creation. Giratina shrieked, a sound of pure, territorial fury. This was its domain, the distortion, the boundary, and this thing was a violation of all boundaries. Regigigas took a slow, defensive stance, its rocky body shifting with the sound of grinding continents. Cresselia fled backward, her psychic aura flickering with panic, her personal pain suddenly insignificant before this impersonal hunger. Cynthia stood utterly still, a statue of grim acceptance. "It's awake," she whispered, the words stolen by the hungry wind. "The lock is broken. Giratina was not the guardian. It was the warden. And that was the prisoner." She finally turned her full gaze back to Naruto. The storm in her eyes had crystallized into a cold, desperate resolve. The ideological chasm between them, shinobi versus champion, force versus bond, outsider versus guardian, yawned wider than the tear in the sky. But beneath it, a new, terrible understanding bridged the gap. They had done this. Together. His alien power, her strained containment. Their clash of methods had shattered the final seal. The hovering pyramid's tip began to gather a sphere of silent, blue annihilation. The air around it warped, light bending into its event horizon. Cynthia's hand went to another ball at her belt, her knuckles white. She didn't release the Pokemon inside. Instead, she looked at Naruto, and for the first time, it was not just as a problem, but as a person. A powerful, dangerous, profoundly confused person who was now inextricably, irrevocably linked to this disaster. "You have power," she stated, the champion's assessment cutting through the gathering drone of the void. "Power that disrupts everything here. I don't know if you can help fix this, or if you'll just make it worse." She took a step closer, the wind whipping her hair like a pale flag. The sphere of annihilating light grew above them, silent and inevitable. "But you are involved now. Your energy is part of the equation. A catalyst." She made her choice. A risky decision, born of utter necessity and the cold calculus of having no other pieces left on the board. "So you will listen to me. You will follow my lead. Not as a subordinate, but as a component in a machine we have one chance to build. Or everyone in this valley, and perhaps the memory of this entire region, dies here today." Her voice held no threat, only a fatalistic certainty. "Do you understand, Uzumaki Naruto?" He looked from her, to the descending pyramid, to the terrified legends, to the glowing, corrupted earth. He was lost. He was a stranger. He was a cause. He was also Uzumaki Naruto, who had never walked away from a fight he'd started, or from people who needed saving, no matter how strange their world. He met her steel-gray eyes and gave a single, sharp nod. An agreement forged in the crucible of a mutual, catastrophic mistake. The pyramid sphere pulsed, and a beam of silent, world-unmaking blue fired down, not at them, but at the heart of the temple, at the source of the glow, aiming to sever the last, fraying remnants of the seal's concept. "Now!" Cynthia cried, her voice breaking its controlled pitch for the first time. She threw a pokeball. "Garchomp, Dragon Rush! Intercept! Full power!" A flash of red light, and a roar that challenged the void itself. A massive, shark-like dragon of blue and red erupted into existence, all brutal angles and primal fury. It didn't hesitate. It shot skyward like a living missile, crossing the distance in a heartbeat, its body wreathed in draconic energy. And Naruto, with no plan but the burning, instinctive will to protect, to push back against the ending of all things, flooded his legs with the last of his personal chakra and launched himself up. Not away, but into the path of the descending doom, following Garchomp's contrail, a golden speck against the infinite black. His hands moved in a blur, not of hesitation, but of grim purpose. The Rasengan that formed between them was larger, denser, louder than any he'd made today, a miniature, screaming son of defiant chaos. He was a shinobi in a world of Pokemon, a creature of bonds in a place of trained partnerships, a storm of will facing the quiet of law. He didn't know the rules. He only knew he had to break this one. Garchomp reached the beam first, not trying to block it head-on, but slicing across its path with a devastating dragon claw, shearing off a fraction of its coherence. The blue energy scorched its hide, leaving not a burn, but a patch of gray, dead scales that flaked to dust. Then Naruto was there, his Rasengan meeting the heart of the null beam. The collision was not of matter, but of meaning. The silent blue law met the screaming, spiraling testament of individual will. There was no explosion. There was a stutter. A localized, screaming rift in causality. The Rasengan didn't overpower the beam, it infected it. The orderly, erasing energy was forced to process the chaotic, life-affirming data of Naruto's chakra. The beam fractured, forking into a dozen jagged, weaker streams that carved molten trenches in the distant mountainsides. The Rasengan dissolved, not spent, but unmade, its very concept questioned by the null energy. The backlash was a physical and metaphysical blow. It felt like being erased from the inside out. Naruto was thrown back through the air, a puppet with cut strings, the world dissolving into a ringing, blue-tinged white. He saw Garchomp spiraling downward, wounded. He saw Cynthia, a small, dark figure on the vast stage of ruin, her face upturned, her expression unreadable from this distance. He hit the ground not with a crash, but with a sickening, rolling impact that stole the remains of his breath. He lay on his back, staring up at the two skies, the torn, bleeding one of this world, and the perfect, geometric horror descending from the tear. The taste of ozone and blood filled his mouth. He had failed. His power was just another noise to be silenced. But as his vision darkened at the edges, he saw Cynthia raise her arm, not in defeat, but in a sharp, commanding gesture. From the treeline at the valley's edge, a new energy surged, a calm, deep brown, the color of fertile earth and unyielding mountain roots. It washed over the stunned Regigigas. The Titan's head lifted. Its eyes blazed anew, not with rage, but with a grim, awakened purpose. And from the opposite cliff, a patch of pure, soothing darkness blossomed, like a pool of liquid night. It pulsed toward the flickering Cresselia, not to attack, but to balance. The lunar Pokémon's frantic light steadied, focused. Cynthia hadn't just been fighting. She'd been orchestrating. Calling in favors from the very fabric of the land. She'd used his catastrophic, chaotic intervention as the ultimate distraction. As consciousness slipped away, the last thing Naruto heard was not the pyramid's drone, but Cynthia's voice, calm and clear across the valley, speaking a single word that was both a prayer and an order. Now. The world erupted in a symphony of light, gold, pink, blue, brown, black, all swirling, not in chaos, but in a desperate, last-ditch harmony, swirling upward toward the geometric heart of the silence. And then, there was only the dark. Chapter 2, The Unseen Prisoner. Consciousness returned like a swimmer breaking a thick, oily surface. There was sound first, a low, rhythmic hum, the gentle trickle of water, the faint, electronic chirp of machinery. Then scent, clean, cool air carrying the mineral tang of wet stone and the crisp, sterile smell of filtered ozone. Last was feeling, the soft, yielding surface beneath him, a dull, deep ache in every muscle and bone, and a strange, muffled silence inside his own skull, as if the usual storm of his chakra had been wrapped in felt. Naruto forced his eyes open. He lay in a small, dimly lit room carved from the same gray granite as the cliffs. It was Spartan, a bed, a simple chair, a shelf with a few unfamiliar, blocky books. The light came from softly glowing panels set into the ceiling. He pushed himself up onto his elbows, his body protesting with a chorus of sharp and throbbing pains. His orange jacket was gone, replaced by a simple, dark gray tunic and pants. His tools, his headband, all gone. A spike of panic, cold and familiar, lanced through him. Captured. Disarmed. The door, a seamless slab of stone, slid aside with a soft hiss. Cynthia stood in the doorway. She had changed as well, into simpler, dark gray clothes similar to his own, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked exhausted, shadows like bruises under her eyes, but her gaze was as sharp and analytical as ever. She held a tray with a steaming bowl and a cup of water. "You're awake," she said. Her voice was neutral, carrying none of the battlefield's steel or the subsequent horror. It was the tone of a clinician. "Your vitals stabilized an hour ago. The residual energy backlash from the clash was significant." "Where am I?" Naruto's voice was a dry rasp. "Where are my things?" "You are in a secure location. Your belongings are safe. The jacket was highly conspicuous. It has been stored." She entered, placing the tray on a small table beside the bed. The bowl held a clear broth with unfamiliar herbs. It smelled clean, restorative. "You need to eat. Your energy systems are deeply depleted. The broth is infused with citrus berry extract and other nutrients optimized for recovery." He ignored the food. The pyramid. The thing in the sky. What happened? Cynthia didn't answer immediately. She pulled the chair over and sat, her movements precise, controlled. She studied him, and he felt like a specimen under a lens again. "The immediate crisis was temporarily stalled," she said finally. "The coordinated counterforce, Regigigas' tectonic focus, a timely intervention from Darkrai to balance Crasselia's distress, and Giratina's containment efforts, managed to push the geometrized manifestation back into a semi-dormant state. It is not gone. It is hovering, contained within the localized spatial tear, but the tear itself remains open. It is a wound. And it is bleeding its influence into the atmosphere, as you saw." She leaned forward slightly. "Your intervention, while catastrophic in its trigger, provided a crucial, if violent, surge of anomalous energy. It acted as a shock to the system. It gave the native legendaries a common, foreign enemy to react against, momentarily unifying their efforts against a greater threat than each other. A crude form of diplomacy, but effective in the short term." "So I'm a useful distraction," Naruto grunted, the old bitterness of being used as a tool rising in his throat. "You are an unknown variable," Cynthia corrected, her tone unwavering. "One that has been forcibly integrated into an equation of existential scale. My priority as Sinnoh's champion is to understand that variable, to quantify it, and to determine if it can be harnessed to solve the equation, or if it must be isolated to prevent further contamination. The words were cold, logical. They stripped the event of its cosmic terror and turned it into a problem set. It was infuriating. And yet, he could see the weight of it on her. She wasn't a cruel jailer, she was a desperate scientist with a live grenade in her lab. You keep calling it the geometrized, he said, forcing himself to sip the water. It was cool, perfectly neutral. A working name. Its true nature is beyond our historical records. It is not a Pokemon. It exhibits no consciousness as we understand it, no emotion, no will, no desire beyond a seemingly algorithmic drive to reduce complex systems to base, orderly, silent states. It is a fragment of a universe that operated on pure, simple physical law, devoid of the chaos of life, spirit, or emotion. Our reality is an aberration to it. A noise. And it seeks to quiet the noise. She stood and walked to the wall, which shimmered and became a transparent screen. Beyond was the main chamber he'd glimpsed, the cavernous space with the water tank, the books, the holographic consoles. It was a breathtaking blend of ancient stone and bleeding-edge technology. This is my private retreat. A sanctuary and a research station. Few know of it. What happens here stays here. That is the first condition of your continued existence outside of a League or Girasol Enterprises containment cell. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Conditions? You are not a prisoner here, she said, turning back to him. But you cannot leave. Not yet. Your energy signature is a beacon. The international police, corporate research divisions, criminal syndicates, all would hunt you for what you represent, a new form of energy. You would be dissected, literally or figuratively. Here you are hidden. Here, we can study the interaction between your chakra and our world's energies in a controlled environment. Study, he repeated, the word tasting like ash. Understand, she amended, a flicker of something, impatience, in her eyes. The lock on the geometrized was broken. To reseal it, or to find a way to force the tear closed, we need a new paradigm. Your chakra interacted with its null energy. It didn't cancel it, it created a third, unstable state. That is a data point. It means there is a potential interface, however volatile. She returned to the chair. My second condition is your cooperation. You will submit to non-invasive scans. You will describe the nature of your energy, your world, to the best of your ability. You will train, under my supervision, to learn control within this world's energy field. And if I say no? Naruto challenged, setting the cup down with a sharp click. Cynthia's expression didn't change. Then I will have you placed in a stasis pod, infused with the strongest psychic dampening agents available, and secreted in the most remote, warded location I know. You will sleep until I, or someone after me, finds a use for you or a way to safely return you to your point of origin. It is not a threat, Uzumaki Naruto. It is the logical containment protocol for a walking metaphysical hazard. The calm, unemotional delivery of the ultimatum was worse than any shout. She meant it. Every word. To her, he was a hazard first, a person a distant second. The loneliness of his arrival crystallized into a hard, cold knot in his stomach. He was utterly, terrifyingly alone. He looked away, at the smooth, featureless wall. The desire was primal, escape, find a way home. The obstacle was insurmountable, an unknown world, a brilliant and ruthless guardian, and an energy signature that made him a walking target. The risky decision was to play along. What's the scan? He asked, his voice flat. A hint of relief, carefully concealed, passed over her features. Or a mapping. My Lucario is highly sensitive to life energy. We need a baseline of your chakra signature without external interference. She stood. Can you walk? He swung his legs off the bed, testing his weight. He was shaky, but the deep ache was receding, soothed by whatever was in the broth. He stood, following her out of the room and into the vast main chamber. It was even more impressive up close. One entire wall was a crystal-clear aquarium, home to luminescent fish and the serene Milotic he'd seen before. Ancient stone tablets stood beside holographic projectors displaying scrolling data and scripts he couldn't read. The centerpiece was a large, circular table where a three-dimensional hologram of the Temple of Balance slowly rotated, the tear in the sky and the hovering pyramid rendered in chilling, precise detail. Lucario was there, standing in a meditative stance in a cleared area. It opened its eyes as they approached, its red gaze penetrating. Naruto felt that gentle, scanning pressure again, like a cool hand passing over his skin. Stand here, please, Cynthia said, pointing to a spot before Lucario. She moved to a console, her fingers flying across a touch interface. Lucario will project a low-intensity aura sphere. I want you to attempt to touch it, to hold it, without triggering a defensive reaction from your chakra. We need to see the interaction at the moment of contact. A sphere of beautiful, serene blue energy formed between Lucario's palms. It hummed with a sound of harmony, of connection. It was the antithesis of the Rasengan's violent, personal spin. Lucario gently pushed it forward. It floated toward Naruto's outstretched hand. He braced himself, remembering the violent feedback from the temple. He tried to hold his chakra still, to be passive. The aura sphere touched his palm. The reaction was less explosive than before, but no less definitive. His skin prickled. Jagged, white sparks of chakra, not a conscious release, but a reflexive, immunological flare, erupted from his pores and lashed at the foreign energy. The perfect blue sphere distorted, its harmony fracturing into a discordant screech before popping like a soap bubble. Lucario flinched, a low whine in its throat. The air smelled of ozone and something sour. Fascinating, Cynthia murmured, her eyes glued to her screens. The rejection is autonomic. Precognitive. Your energy doesn't just defend, it rejects the fundamental premise of cooperative energy. It's ontological xenophobia. It fights back. Naruto summarized bluntly, flexing his tingling hand. That's what it does. It asserts, she corrected, turning from the screen. Chakra, as you describe it, is the energy of individual will, shaped by personal discipline. Aura, and by extension the psychic energies of this world, are energies of connection, empathy, shared fields. They are philosophies made manifest. Your very existence here is a philosophical argument. A loud, disruptive one. She walked over, her brow furrowed in thought. This presents a profound problem. The legendaries we need to appeal to, Cresselia Darkrai, are beings of deep emotion and psychic connection. Your presence, your energy, is anathema to them. It is the reason Cresselia's probe recoiled so violently. You are, to a psychic, a screaming void of solitary will. You cannot harmonize with them. Any attempt to combine our powers for a sealing ritual would likely fail at the first step. Naruto felt a surge of frustration. So I'm useless? Or just a bomb waiting to go off? You are a different kind of tool, she said, her gaze turning speculative. The geometrized is impersonal law. Your chakra is personal will. They are opposite ends of a spectrum that excludes the middle ground of psychic harmony. One cannot reason with a law. But one can argue with it with a sufficiently strong counterwill. She looked at the hologram of the silent pyramid. Your Rasengan didn't break its beam. It created a logical paradox for it. That might be the key. Not harmony, but forceful negotiation. The idea hung in the air, audacious and terrifying. Using him not as a component of a seal, but as a blunt instrument against the silence. But to do that, she continued, her voice dropping, we would need to amplify your will. To focus it to a point that can pierce the null field. And to do that, we would need the triad of balance. Naruto blinked. The what? Ancient artifacts, she said, moving to the hologram table and zooming the map out to show all of Sinnoh. 3 points glowed, a northern ice field, a large lake to the east, and a distant island to the southwest. The icicle crown, the mist veil, and the sandstone scepter. They were used by ancient shamans to communicate with and calm the legendaries. They are foci, not for raw power, but for clarity, intuition, and enacted will. Separately, they are historical curiosities. Together, and in the right hands, they could theoretically allow a wielder to project their essence with immense precision. She looked at him. If your chakra is a shout, the triad would be a megaphone. Or a scalpel. We could use it to project your argument, your defiant, chaotic will, directly into the heart of the geometrized, not to destroy it, but to confuse its algorithm, to force it to recalibrate, perhaps long enough to shunt it back through the tear and seal it. It was a plan. A mad, desperate plan that hinged entirely on him. On the very thing that disrupted everything here. Where are these things? He asked. Lost. Guarded. Or both. She gestured to the glowing points. The crown is deep in the iceberg ruins, now a lair for powerful and territorial ice-type Pokemon. The veil is at the bottom of Lake Acuity, watched over by Uxie, the being of knowledge, who erases the memory of the unworthy. The scepter is in the ruined castle on Iron Island, a place saturated with aggressive ghost and steel types. Retrieving them would be a series of trials worthy of myth. And we would have to do it quickly, quietly, and before other parties with less noble intentions decipher what is happening and seek the artifacts, or you, for themselves. The scope of it was staggering. 3 dungeons. 3 trials. A race against time and unseen enemies. You want to go after them, Naruto stated. We have no other viable vector, Cynthia said, her expression grim. But before we can take a single step into the field, you must learn one fundamental skill, how to not be a beacon. How to mute the philosophical shout of your existence. She walked to a cabinet and retrieved a simple, gray wristband made of a dull, mesh-like metal. Or a dampening alloy. It will suppress the noise you emit, making you less detectable to psychic scans and to Pokemon sensitive to energy fields. Put it on. Never take it off outside these walls. He took it, slipping it on. The effect was immediate and disorienting. It was like going partially deaf. The constant, low-level hum of his own chakra circulation, a sensation as familiar as his own heartbeat, became distant, muffled. It felt wrong. Vulnerable. It will feel like a handicap, Cynthia observed. It is. But it is also your first lesson in control here. You must learn to operate without relying on the constant broadcast of your energy. You must become more than your chakra. She handed him the bowl of broth, which had cooled slightly. Eat. Rest. Tomorrow, we begin your education. We have perhaps a week before the tier's instability reaches a critical threshold and the geometrize begins its next active phase. And we have less time than that before the world's other hunters come looking for the anomaly that briefly flared in the sky over the Temple of Balance. Naruto took the bowl, his mind reeling. A prisoner, a student, a potential weapon. His path in this world was narrowing to a single, treacherous tightrope. As he ate, Cynthia returned to her consoles, her silhouette framed by the glowing hologram of the wounded world. In the tranquil water of the large tank, the Milotic watched him, its large, intelligent eyes unblinking. Then, it did something strange. It swam to the glass directly in front of him, opened its mouth, and released a stream of perfect, silver bubbles. They rose in a slow, spiral pattern that echoed, unmistakably, the motion of a raisin gan. He froze, the spoon halfway to his mouth. The Milotic held his gaze for a long moment, then turned with liquid grace and vanished into the fronds at the back of the tank. In her chair, Cynthia watched a secondary monitor. It displayed not data, but a real-time aura readout from Lucario. The graph had spiked wildly during the aura sphere test. And it had done something else, just now, when the Milotic blew those bubbles. It had synced, for a single, flawless millisecond, with the natural, tranquil energy flow of the water. Her fingers steepled under her chin. He disrupts psychic harmony, she thought, the scholar in her thrilled and terrified. But does he disrupt, or does he resonate with something else? Something older, more fundamental than empathy? Something as primal as a whirlpool or a typhoon? On the main screen, the hologram of the temple pulsed. The tear bled its silent light. And far away, in a sterile office in Veilstone City, a man in a white lab coat reviewed corrupted sensor data from a scrambled satellite feed, data showing a brief, impossible energy signature that argued with reality itself, right before the legendary convergence was mysteriously paused. He smiled, a thin, acquisitive smile, and began typing a priority message. The hunt was already on. Naruto finished the broth, the weight of the dampening band on his wrist, the memory of the Milotic spiral, and the gaze of the tired champion settling upon him like layers of a strange, new armor. He was in the deep end of an ocean he didn't understand. And the only way was to learn how to swim in its currents, or sink, taking this beautiful, terrifying world with him. Chapter 3, The First Lesson. Dawn in the hidden retreat was not announced by sunlight, but by a soft, melodic chime that seemed to emanate from the stone itself. The ambient lighting in the main chamber shifted subtly from a cool, nocturnal blue to a warm, golden hue, mimicking the sunrise Naruto couldn't see. He had not slept well. The unfamiliar bed, the suffocating quiet imposed by the wristband, the sheer, gnawing reality of his situation, it was a cacophony of silence that kept him tossing. He found Cynthia in the cleared training area, not at her consoles. She wore simple dark training clothes, her hair in a severe ponytail. Before her, Lucario stood in a meditative stance, its eyes closed, the faint blue aura around its paws shimmering like heat haze. The air in the chamber hummed with a different energy today, not the hum of machines, but a focused, waiting stillness. Good, she said without looking at him. Her voice was clear, devoid of yesterday's clinical distance, but no less commanding. We have no time to waste on pleasantries. Your body has recovered enough for basic activity. The real work begins now. Naruto approached, the dampening band a constant, irritating pressure on his wrist. What kind of work? More tests? Education, she corrected, finally turning. Her gray eyes swept over him, assessing his posture, the tension in his shoulders. You move through the world like a typhoon. Impressive for destruction, useless for precision. The first lesson is perception. You rely on your chakra as a blunt sensory tool. Here, that is like using a landslide to find a lost needle. You must learn to listen to the world on its own terms. She gestured to Lucario. My partner perceives aura, the life energy inherent to all things here. It is subtler than your chakra, more connective. He can sense emotions, track beings across vast distances, read the health of a forest from a single leaf. You will not learn to do that. But you can learn to sense the absence of harmony your presence creates. To feel the ripple you make. Close your eyes. Wary, Naruto complied. The darkness behind his eyelids was total in the windowless cavern. Breathe. Not from your chest. From your center. Her instructions were crisp, unyielding. Ignore your chakra coils. Imagine your senses as a net spread out across the room. Feel the temperature gradients. The minute currents of air from the ventilation. The vibration of the water pump in the tank. He tried. It was maddeningly difficult. His shinobi training had honed his senses to detect threats, heartbeats, killing intent, the rustle of a kunai pouch. This was different. It was about passive awareness, not active hunting. He felt nothing but his own impatience. Your frustration is a beacon. Cynthia's voice cut through his thoughts. It tightens your muscles, quickens your breath. It is a signal. To a Pokemon like a Lucario or a Galade, you are currently shouting in a library. Relax. Observe. He took a deeper, slower breath, forcing his shoulders down. He focused on the hum, sorting it into layers. The deep thrum of the generators below. The higher-pitched whine of a holographic projector on standby. The soft, almost musical trickle of water over rocks in the tank. Better, she acknowledged. Now Lucario will release a tiny, contained pulse of aura. I want you to point to its location the moment you feel it. Not with your eyes. With your intention. A moment of silence. Then Naruto felt it, not a sound or a touch, but a disturbance. Like a single, perfect drop of ink falling into the still pool of his newfound awareness. It was a gentle pressure, a soft, blue presence that appeared to his left, near the bookshelves. He pointed. Direction is correct. Distance is off by 2 meters. Again. They drilled for an hour. Lucario would send out tiny, localized aura pulses, behind him, above him, at his feet. Naruto's accuracy improved from crude guesses to within a meter. It wasn't chakra sensing. It was learning to read the subtle wrinkles his foreign energy created in the local aura field. He was learning to see his own shadow. Enough theory, Cynthia said, her tone shifting from instructor to strategist. Now application. The triad artifacts are not merely hidden, they are protected by environments and guardians attuned to specific energies. The iceberg ruins, for example, are a place of perfect, silent cold. Your chakra is heat and noise. Entering as you are would be like lighting a bonfire in a sacred tomb. You would trigger a defensive reaction from every ice type within a mile. She walked to a storage locker and returned with 2 objects. One was a small, pale blue shard of crystal that glowed with a soft, inner light. The other was a rough, gray river stone. This is a dawn stone fragment, touched by Craselia's light long ago. It resonates with gentle, psychic-aligned, healing energy. This, she held up the stone, is inert. A blank slate. She placed the dawn stone shard in his palm. Hold this. Do nothing. Just hold it. The moment the crystal touched his skin, his chakra rebelled. It was an instinctive, visceral rejection. The stone's energy was an affront, a soft, coaxing whisper trying to soothe the raging river inside him. Jagged white sparks crackled at his fingertips. The dawn stone's glow flickered violently, and a tiny, hairline fracture appeared on its surface with an audible ping. You are fighting it, Cynthia observed, her voice calm. Your energy sees a foreign presence and attempts to dominate or destroy it. That is your default state. For our purposes, it is unacceptable. You must learn coexistence. She took the cracked shard and gave him the gray river stone. It was cool, smooth, and utterly neutral. It held no energy, no intent. Now this. He held it. Nothing happened. No sparks, no resistance. It was just a rock. The dawn stone represents a psychic-type environment, or a Pokemon like Cresselia, she explained. The gray stone represents a normal-type environment, or a place of simple, baseline existence. Your energy does not conflict with normal because there is nothing to conflict with. Your first task is to achieve this state of non-conflict in the presence of antagonistic energy. Not to win. Not to lose. To hold a truce. She handed the dawn stone back. Again. This time, do not try to suppress your chakra. That will cause a catastrophic backlash. Acknowledge its desire to lash out. Feel it. Then consciously choose to redirect that energy. Imagine it flowing around the stone, not through it. Let the stone's energy exist in a pocket of stillness within your storm. It was the most counterintuitive thing he'd ever been asked to do. Shinobi training was about drawing power out, shaping it, directing it with lethal intent. This was about creating a vacuum, a controlled null space within himself. It felt like trying to hold his breath while sprinting. He focused, closing his eyes. The dawn stone's gentle pulse was an itch in his brain. His chakra, hot and bright, surged towards the point of contact, ready to scour the irritation away. He gritted his teeth, visualizing the energy as water. He built a mental dam, then a canal, directing the flow away from his palm, circling it back into his system. The violent surge hesitated, pooled, then slowly, reluctantly, began to reroute. The sparks died. The dawn stone's glow steadied. The crack didn't heal, but no new ones formed. A cold sweat beaded on his forehead from the effort of not acting. Hold it, Cynthia murmured. That is the feeling. That is control. Not the absence of power, but the conscious governance of its expression. For the next 2 hours, they moved through a brutal, mentally exhausting regimen. She brought out other objects, a leaf still vibrant with grass-type energy, which crumpled to dust in his hand before he could stabilize, a warm, porous rock from a volcanic stream that cracked down the middle, a cold, magnetic ore that caused his chakra to spin wildly, making the small metal objects on a nearby table tremble. Each failure was met not with anger, but with swift, analytical feedback. You anticipated conflict with the magnetic ore. You tensed. Your chakra responded to your tension, not the ore's energy. You must separate your emotional reaction from your energetic one. It was grating, tedious work. Where was the action? The tangible progress? This felt like trying to disarm a bomb by listening to its heartbeat. His frustration peaked during the final exercise. Cynthia had Lucario stand across the room and project the softest, most benign wave of aura imaginable, a blanket of calm serenity, the emotional equivalent of a sun-drenched meadow. Let it wash over you, Cynthia instructed. Do not resist. Simply observe the sensation. The wave touched him. It was gentle, warm, inviting peace. And his chakra recoiled as if burned. It wasn't a defensive flare this time. It was a violent, almost offended repulsion. The calm aura didn't just dissipate. It was reflected back at Lucario as a jagged spike of agitated, chaotic energy. Lucario flinched, its paws coming up to dispel the corrupted wave with a sharp pulse of its own aura. Enough! Naruto snapped, swiping the sweat from his brow. The dampening band felt like a shackle. This isn't working! My power fights everything here. Maybe that's just what it is. Maybe trying to make it play nice is impossible. Cynthia regarded him coolly. Is that the philosophy of a shinobi? To give up when a technique is difficult? To blame the nature of your chakra instead of your mastery over it? The challenge was deliberate, a probe aimed at his pride. It's not about giving up, he shot back. My techniques protect people. They end fights. What does this energy etiquette lesson do? How does holding a rock without breaking it save anyone? It prevents you from causing unintended harm, she said, her voice dropping, gaining a hard edge. Like you did to Cresselia? Like you did to the temple lock? A hammer is a fine tool. But if you are nothing but a hammer, every problem looks like a nail, and you will smash every delicate thing you encounter. The geometrized is not a nail. It is a fault line in reality. We cannot hammer it. We must perform surgery. And for that, surgeon, you need a scalpel, not a club. The truth of it was a cold splash of water. He looked away, his jaw tight, the frustration curdling into shame. She was right. He had been a bull in a china shop, and the cost was etched into the sky. We will break here, Cynthia said, her tone softening a fraction. Go to the mineral spring at the back of the cavern. The water is infused with elements that may help soothe your energy pathways and your temperament. I need to analyze the data from this session. Defeated and simmering, Naruto stalked toward the rear of the chamber, down a short, natural tunnel. It opened into a small, hidden grotto. A natural hot spring steamed gently, the air thick with the scent of salt and sulfur. He stripped to his shorts and sank into the near scalding water with a hiss, the heat immediately leaching the tension from his knotted muscles. Alone, the full weight of his isolation settled on him. No Konoha. No familiar faces. No purpose but this vague, terrifying mission to fix a mistake he barely understood, guided by a woman who saw him as a dangerous equation. He leaned his head back against the smooth rock, the steam condensing on his face like tears he wouldn't shed. A soft splash. His eyes snapped open. At the far edge of the spring, half hidden by a curtain of dripping moss, was the Milotic. It watched him, its large, sapphire-blue eyes holding an intelligence that felt ancient. It didn't flee. It didn't display aggression. It simply observed. Remembering the training, Naruto consciously tried to lower his guard, to quiet the restless storm beneath his skin. He held very still. The Milotic glided closer, its serpentine body moving with impossible grace through the water. It stopped an arm's length away. Then, one of its long, ribbon-like feelers extended, not tentatively, but with a serene certainty. It brushed against his arm, the same arm bearing the dampening band. There was no conflict. No spark. The feeler was cool and silken. It was just a touch. Then, the Milotic began to hum. A low, melodic vibration that resonated through the water and the very rock, bypassing his ears to vibrate in his sternum. It wasn't a move, no sing, or disarming voice attack. It was a song. A wordless, ancient lullaby. As it hummed, a soft, pinkish bioluminescence emanated from its scales, lighting the grotto with a gentle, rosy glow. And for the first time since arriving in this world, Naruto's chakra didn't rebel. It didn't fight or repulse. It listened. The frantic, defensive energy stilled. The hot, agitated river slowed, becoming a warm, deep, placid flow. The dampening band on his wrist suddenly felt superfluous, a clumsy attempt to achieve what this creature did with a simple song. A profound, fragile peace washed over him, the peace of not having to fight, not having to prove anything. Just being accepted. The melodic song faded. It gave him one last, deep look, a look that seemed to see past the whisker marks, past the nine tails, to the lonely boy who just wanted to be seen. Then it turned and slipped back into the darker water, disappearing into the connected tank. Naruto sat in the steaming spring, stunned. He hadn't controlled his chakra by force of will. He had calmed it, by calming himself. And the Pokemon hadn't used a technique to suppress him, it had used a song to invite him to stillness. It was an offer of peace. A bond of quiet understanding, not a battle of wills. It was power through trust, not control. He looked at his hands under the glowing water. No sparks. No distortion. Just skin. When he emerged, dressed, and returned to the main chamber, Cynthia was waiting. She held a data pad, but her attention was on him. She studied his face, his posture, the residual calm that must have been visible. "The mineral spring is beneficial, I see," she remarked. "It wasn't the minerals," Naruto said, his voice quieter, more grounded. "It was the Milotic." Cynthia's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Ah. She is a discerning judge. She does not offer her song to those she deems a threat to the peace of this place." She set the data pad down. "Your energy signature spiked with frustration during the training, then dropped to an unprecedented low baseline while you were in the spring. And now, it's different. Not weaker. More integrated. Temporarily." "It didn't fight her," he said, the revelation still settling. "Why?" "Because she did not fight it," Cynthia replied, a thoughtful light entering her eyes. "Milotic's power is not about dominance. It is about mesmerizing beauty, about calming raging waters. She did not see your chakra as an enemy to be defeated. She saw a storm to be soothed." She paced slowly, her mind visibly racing. "Perhaps our approach has been wrong. We have been trying to teach you to control your energy as one controls a weapon. But what if the key is not control, but harmony? A different kind of harmony than psychic unity. A harmony of mutual respect between two powerful, separate wills. Your chakra is a defiant I am. Perhaps it can learn to say and you are too." It was a subtle shift, but a monumental one. She was no longer just trying to make him less destructive. She was seeking a way for his unique power to coexist. Before she could elaborate, a soft, urgent alarm chirped from her main console. She turned, her expression tightening. On the screen, a map of Sinnoh displayed a red dot pulsing over the southern region, near an area labeled Great Marsh. "An energy anomaly," she murmured, enhancing the data. Her breath caught. "Massive psychic disturbance. Not legendary scale, but significant. The signature." She isolated a wavelength graph. "It's laced with the same artificial psychic amplifier poison that was used at the temple. And it's moving." She turned to Naruto, all softness gone, the champion's mask firmly back in place. "Our timetable has moved up. Whoever poisoned the temple is testing their toxin elsewhere. They are drawing out a powerful psychic-type Pokemon, likely to capture or study it. We must stop them." "We?" Naruto asked. "You need field experience in this world," she said, grabbing a travel cloak. "And I need to see how you operate when the stakes are real, but not apocalyptic. This is a contained crisis. A test for both of us." She fixed him with a look. "But remember the lesson of the Milotic. Power through trust, not just force. Your way may save the day, but it might also break what we are trying to save. The choice will be yours." She tossed him a simple, dark jacket. "Wear this. Leave the orange. It's a beacon." As Naruto shrugged on the unfamiliar jacket, he looked at the hologram of the silent, hovering pyramid. This new mission was a distraction, but also a step. A chance to act, to protect. And a chance to prove, to her, and to himself, that he could be more than just a bull in a china shop. He followed Cynthia out through the waterfall illusion, back into the world that had howled him into its heart, now facing a different, more human kind of danger. The path ahead was no clearer, but for the first time, he felt he might have a compass, however faint its pull. Chapter 4: The Marsh's Silent Scream. The Great Marsh was a physical assault on the senses. It was nothing like the forests of Fire Country, with their clean lines of cedar and pine, their clearings dappled with sun. This was a writhing, gasping, living entity. The air was a warm, wet blanket, thick with the sweet rot scent of blooming fungi, the tang of stagnant water, and the musky odor of unseen creatures. A cacophony of life layered over a baseline hum of insects, deep, resonant croaks, piercing avian shrieks, chittering from the undergrowth, and distant, haunting calls that seemed to come from the mist itself. It was a world of mud and mist, where water and land bled into one another, and the very ground felt like a living, breathing thing. Cynthia moved through it not like a hunter, but like a piece of the landscape given human form. Her dark-clad figure slipped between hanging vines and over spongy mounds with a silent, preternatural grace. She didn't walk on the muddy, trodden paths, she flowed between them, her boots leaving only the faintest impressions in the peat. Beside her, Lucario was a blue-gray wraith, its ears constantly twitching, its aura sense painting a living map of heat, emotion, and intent that Naruto could only imagine. Naruto, by contrast, felt like a walking disaster. Every step was a wet squelch that seemed obscenely loud. Vines snagged on his borrowed jacket with spiteful persistence. Strange, long-legged birds with absurdly colorful plumage burst from the reeds with indignant shrieks at his approach. He was a foreign body, and the swamp was keen to expel him. "You move like a rampaging rhyperior," Cynthia said quietly, not looking back, her voice barely a murmur above the marsh's din. "Breathe. Listen. Let the environment tell you where to step. Your chakra isn't just in your coils, it's an extension of your awareness. Use it to feel the firmness of the ground, the give of the roots, the density of the brush ahead. Be a part of the flow, not an object passing through it." It was a shinobi lesson in ecological disguise. He closed his eyes for a second, extending his senses not with the brute force scan of a sensory ninja, but more delicately, as she taught him. He felt the subtle tremors in the waterlogged earth, the minute shifts in air pressure around dense thickets, the faint thrum of life from the trees. He took a step, adjusting his weight, then another. The next few steps were quieter, less intrusive. "Better," she acknowledged, a hint of approval in her tone. She paused, and Lucario pointed a single clawed finger off to the east. "The disturbance is centered there. The psychic resonance is pained. It's not an attack pattern. It's a distress signal, amplified and twisted." They moved toward it, the vibrant, noisy life of the marsh dying away around them. The air grew colder, the rich scents fading into a flat, metallic tang. The constant chorus of Pokemon cries dwindled to nothing, replaced by an oppressive, waiting silence that was louder than any noise. It was the silence of a vacuum, of life holding its breath. Then, they saw the source of the silence. A clearing opened before them, but it was wrong. The vibrant greens and rich browns of the swamp were bleached to a uniform, phosphorescent gray. The mud was dry and cracked like a desert floor. Moss hung from the branches in brittle, colorless clumps. Every plant within a 50-meter radius was dead, not rotted, but desiccated, as if the very concept of moisture and life had been sucked from them. In the center of this dead zone stood a machine. It was a tripod of gleaming, surgical steel, humming with a low, industrial drone that was the only sound. Atop it, a spherical emitter pulsed with a familiar, ugly magenta light, the exact same psychic amplifier poison that had corrupted the Temple of Balance. And crouched before it, trapped in a cage of shimmering, projected energy that matched the emitter's pulse, was a Pokemon. It was elegant and antelope-like, with a cream-colored body and a flowing, purple mane. A single, spiraling horn glowed with a faint, desperate light as it pressed against the energy field. A Zatu. Every pulse from the machine made the psychic/flying type flinch violently, its eyes squeezed shut in silent agony. The energy cage wasn't just containing it, it was resonating with the Zata's own innate psychic power, amplifying it to a torturous fever pitch and then feeding it back in a vicious feedback loop. It was a psychic vivisection, a silent, technological scream being ripped from the Pokemon's mind and broadcast as raw, psychic static that had scared all other life away. Around the machine, 3 figures in sleek, gray and white uniforms moved with cold efficiency, their features obscured by tinted visors. A stylized G emblem was prominent on their shoulders. They checked tablets, adjusted dials on the machine's base, their movements clinical, detached. A fourth stood guard, a hulking, crocodilian Pokemon, a crocodile, at his side, its yellow eyes scanning the dead perimeter with predatory alertness. "Girasol Enterprises," Cynthia whispered, her voice a blade of absolute zero. "I should have known. They're Applied Metaphysical Energy Division. This is a field test. They're not just studying, they're stress testing. Trying to artificially induce and harness a psychic breakthrough, no matter the cost to the subject." Naruto felt a cold fury solidify in his gut. This wasn't a battle between warriors or a clash of ideologies. This was cruelty. A clean, calculated, profane cruelty. The desire was immediate and white-hot: smash the machine. Free the captive. The obstacle was a layered defense: the machine itself, the 4 guards, the vigilant crocodile, and Cynthia's unspoken command for restraint. A direct assault could cause the machine to malfunction catastrophically, frying the Zata's mind. Or it could trigger a psychic backlash that would turn the Zata's amplified pain into an uncontrollable weapon. "We need to disable the emitter without sending a fatal shock through the Zata's system," Cynthia murmured, her mind racing. "Lucario can attempt a pinpoint aura sphere to the power core, but the energy field may deflect it. We need a distraction. Something to pull the guard and the crocodile away, just for a few seconds. Naruto's eyes scanned the scene, the shinobi part of him analyzing angles, lines of sight, vulnerabilities. The crocodile was the immediate physical threat. The machine was the source. The humans were the controllers. A risky decision crystallized, born of instinct and a burning need to act. I'll be the distraction, he said, his voice low. You and Lucario take out the machine. Get ready. Naruto, wait. Cynthia began, but he was already moving. He didn't charge. He used a short, sharp body flicker, a chakra-fueled burst of speed that made him vanish from her side and reappear as a blur at the edge of the dead zone, 20 meters from the crocodile, in plain sight. Hey! He yelled, his voice cutting through the machine's monotonous hum like a gunshot. What the hell do you think you're doing to that thing? All heads turned. The guards stiffened, their hands going to belts holding pokeballs and sidearms. The lead researcher, a man with a sharp face visible under his raised visor, scowled. An intruder! Crocodile, foul play! Eliminate the interference! The crocodile snarled, dark, malicious energy wreathing its claws as it lunged forward with terrifying speed for its bulk, closing the distance in a heartbeat. Its intent was a palpable wave of aggression. Perfect. Naruto stood his ground until the last possible moment, then sidestepped with the shinobi's fluidity, letting the crocodile's charge carry it past him. As it went by, he didn't strike it. Instead, he slapped a palm flat against its rough, scaled flank. Not an attack. A transfer. He pushed a tiny, controlled thread of his chakra into the Pokemon, not the volatile, aggressive kind, but a simple pulse of raw, attention-grabbing, irritating energy. It was the metaphysical equivalent of tossing a pebble into its nervous system. The effect was instantaneous. The crocodile skidded to a halt, whirling around, confused and enraged. The foreign energy wasn't hurting it, but it was a buzzing, itchy static under its scales, an incomprehensible violation of its personal space. It forgot its orders, its focus narrowing entirely to this strange, irritating human. It opened its maw, and a torrent of jagged, brown rocks materialized in the air and shot toward Naruto, a stone-edge attack. Naruto leapt backward, the rocks tearing smoking gouges in the dead earth where he'd stood. Is that all you got? He taunted, leading the enraged Pokemon further away from the machine, toward the thicker, living treeline. A classic diversion, become the biggest, loudest, most infuriating problem. Seeing their guard Pokemon drawn off, the remaining 3 guards fumbled for their own Pokeballs. Release the defensive units! Protect the emitter! But in that moment of split-second distraction, Cynthia moved. Lucario, now! Vacuum wave to the central coupling! Lucario was a blur of blue and black. It didn't approach the shimmering energy field. It stopped at its very edge, took a microsecond stance, and thrust its palms forward. A near-invisible pulse of compressed, focused fighting-type energy shot out, not a glowing sphere, but a precise, lance-like beam of pure, concussive force. It struck the tripod leg where the emitter met the main housing. The steel shrieked in protest, denting inward with the sound of tearing metal. The emitter's pulse faltered, the magenta light flickering erratically. The Zata's head lifted a fraction, a low, shuddering moan escaping its beak. Again! Cynthia commanded. But the lead researcher was faster. He slammed his hand on a control panel on his wrist. Contingency beta! Redirect all amplification to the subject. Force an evolutionary burst. The machine whined, the emitter glowing brighter, fiercer, the magenta deepening to an ugly violet. The energy cage around the Zata tightened, the psychic feedback loop intensifying exponentially. The Zata threw its head back in a soundless scream, its horn blazing with uncontrolled, agonized power. A visible wave of distorted psychic energy, a psychic attack born not of battle, but of pure, excruciating suffering, exploded outward from it, wild and undirected. It slammed into Lucario, throwing the fighting type back into the muck. It washed over Cynthia, who grunted, clutching her head as the mental static, laced with pain, attacked her senses. The 3 guards cried out, dropping their Pokeballs, clutching their temples as blood trickled from their noses. Naruto, grappling with the crocodile at the treeline, felt the wave pass over him. His chakra flared in automatic, defiant defense, scattering the psychic energy around him like water off a granite boulder. He saw Cynthia stagger, saw Lucario struggle to rise. The machine was critically damaged but still functioning, now pouring all its poisonous energy directly into the Zatu, trying to break it into a new, more powerful form, or kill it in the process. The researcher, wiping blood from his lip, grinned madly. Observe! The forced evolution threshold. The power output is skyrocketing. Naruto's choice point crystallized. Cynthia's way, precision, strategy, minimal force, had been countered. The machine was too resilient, the situation too volatile. The obstacle was now a time bomb attached to an innocent creature. He made his decision. A gamble based on the lesson in the spring, and the fury in his heart. He disengaged from the crocodile with another burst of speed, appearing back in the dead zone, between the shrieking machine and the thrashing Zatu. He ignored the guards, ignored the researchers' shouts. He looked at the Zatu. Its eyes were wide, pools of ancient wisdom drowned in terror and pain. He saw not a weapon, not a specimen, but a being in torment. He didn't try to break the energy cage with force. He remembered the melodic song, the harmony of separate wills. He raised his hands, not in a seal, but palms open, facing the Zatu. He closed his eyes. He didn't push his chakra out. Instead, he drew it in, focusing it not as a weapon, but as a presence. A declaration. He thought not of dominating the machine's energy, but of offering a shelter. A different kind of wall. "Hey," he said, his voice cutting through the machine's whine, calm and certain. "I'm here. It's gonna be okay." He poured his will into a single, focused concept: protection. His chakra erupted from him, not in a wild explosion, but in a dome. A shimmering, orange-tinted hemisphere of energy that enveloped him and the Zatu. It was a rudimentary, instinctive version of a chakra barrier, but imbued with pure, defiant intent, the will to create a safe space. The machine's amplified psychic poison beam hit the dome. And for the second time, two incompatible energies met. But this was not a clash. This was a buffer. Naruto's barrier didn't try to negate the psychic energy, it interposed itself. It absorbed the punishing, amplified wavelengths, the chaotic feedback, into its own chaotic, willful structure. The dome crackled with violent, conflicting light, orange against violet, straining under the pressure. Naruto gritted his teeth, feeling the assault like a physical weight, a screaming headache that threatened to split his skull. He could feel the Zatu's pain echoing through the barrier, a psychic scream muffled by his own energy. Inside the dome, cut off from the direct amplification, the Zatu's thrashing slowed. Its horns blazed dim from agony to a focused glow. It looked at Naruto, its intelligent eyes focusing through the pain, seeing not a human, but a fortress of will. Outside, Cynthia recovered, seeing the opportunity his desperate, costly shelter provided. "Lucario! The power source! Full force! Now!" Lucario surged to its feet, its aura blazing like a blue star. It crossed the distance in a flash, its paws glowing with a blinding, concentrated light. It didn't aim for the emitter. It drove a force palm, charged with every ounce of its power, directly into the machine's main power cell at its base. There was a concussive crack, a shower of white-hot sparks, and the humming drone died. The magenta light winked out. The energy cage vanished. The sudden silence was profound, ringing in their ears. Naruto let the chakra dome dissipate, staggering as the feedback ceased. The Zatu slumped to the cracked earth, breathing in ragged, shuddering gasps, its horns glowed dim but steady. The lead researcher stared in horror at his broken, smoking machine. "No, the data! You've ruined years of work!" Cynthia was on him in an instant, her presence suddenly towering, suffocating. "Girasol Enterprises," she said, her voice colder than the deepest cave. "You are in violation of 17 international statutes regarding Pokemon welfare, ecological preservation, and the unauthorized use of Class A psychic amplifiers. Your equipment is confiscated. You will be detained here until the international police arrive." She didn't touch him. She didn't need to. Her gaze pinned him in place like a specimen. The other guards, cowed and nursing psychic headaches, offered no resistance as Lucario herded them together. Naruto knelt beside the Zatu. It looked up at him, exhaustion in every line of its body, but the pain was gone from its eyes. Slowly, with great effort, it raised a wingtip and touched his hand. A faint, clean psychic touch, not an invasion, but a thank you. It carried an image, the dark, orange dome shielding it from the blinding, painful light. A safe darkness. "You're welcome," Naruto whispered. He heard a step behind him. Cynthia stood there, looking down at him and the Zatu. Her expression was unreadable. She had seen his reckless charge, his brute force barrier. She had also seen it work. He had saved the Zatu, but he had done it by creating a massive, energy-intensive spectacle. "The barrier," she said finally. "It was not a technique of this world. It was a manifestation of pure will. You didn't break their machine. You gave the Zatu a hiding place until I could." "Did it work?" he asked wearily. "Yes," she admitted. "But it was a sledgehammer. A necessary one this time." She paused. "The crocodile?" Naruto gestured to the treeling. The large Pokemon was sitting on its haunches, looking confused but no longer aggressive. The irritating pulse of chakra had faded. It was just following orders. Got a little pissed off is all. Cynthia nodded slowly. She looked from him to the broken machine, then to the recovering Zatu. The ideological contrast hung between them, but it was blurring. His instinct to protect had been crude, but its core was sound. Her strategy had been precise, but it had required his unorthodox, disruptive intervention to succeed. "We must go," she said. "The authorities will be here soon. We cannot be found." As they turned to leave the dead zone, the Zata let out a soft, chiming cry. It struggled to its feet. With a weak flutter of its wings, it took off, not into the sky, but toward a specific, gnarled tree at the edge of the clearing. It landed on a high branch and, with its beak, gently pried something loose. It glided back down, landing before Naruto. In its beak was a feather. Long, elegant, and breathtakingly beautiful, tipped with a deep purple that faded to cream, and shimmering with a latent, psychic sheen. It dropped the feather at Naruto's feet. "A gift feather," Cynthia breathed, surprise cutting through her reserve. "From a Zatu that has seen a possible future, and approved of it. It is a token of profound trust. It is also a powerful psychic focus." Naruto picked up the feather. It was warm to the touch, lighter than air. Holding it, he felt a gentle, soothing resonance, like the echo of the melodic song. It didn't fight his chakra. It seemed to bridge to it, translating its chaotic will into a calmer, clearer frequency. As they melted back into the living marsh, leaving the gray scar and the detained researchers behind, Naruto tucked the feather inside his jacket, next to the dampening band. It was a small thing, but it felt like the first real, earned piece of this world he possessed. Cynthia walked beside him, silent for a long time. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet. "You acted without my order. You risked exposing your nature. You used your power in a way I cannot predict or control." She glanced at him. "And you saved a life that would have been lost to greed. The lesson of the marsh is not a simple one, Uzumaki Naruto. Remember that." Overhead, through a gap in the canopy, the strange stars of this world began to appear. Somewhere far to the north, in the heart of Mount Coronet, the geometries hung in its silent prison break, a problem waiting for a solution that was becoming more complex by the hour. And in a Veilstone city office, a man in a white coat watched a corrupted, shaky feed from a dropped guard's tablet, a feed showing a blur of motion, an orange dome, and a boy with whisker-marked cheeks. He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with something beyond scientific curiosity. "So," he murmured to himself, "the champion's volatile new tool has a heart. And a will strong enough to manifest a barrier against a directed psychic amplifier. How very exploitable." He began typing a new set of protocols. The subject was not just an energy source. It was a potential catalyst. And catalysts, in the right environment, could be made to trigger precisely the reactions one desired. The race was no longer just for artifacts. It was for the heart of the storm itself. Chapter 5: The Weight of Feathers. The feather was a whisper against his heart. Naruto could feel it through the fabric of the borrowed jacket, a soft, persistent warmth that bled through like a psychic promise. It wasn't the aggressive heat of his chakra, nor the cold clarity of the dampening band. It was something else, a gentle, psychic resonance that seemed to translate the chaotic noise of his energy into a calmer, more cohesive hum. The return journey to the hidden retreat was conducted in a silence thicker than the marsh's mist. Cynthia's mind was clearly somewhere else, her gray eyes distant, processing the events with a frightening, algorithmic intensity that made the airfield charged. When the waterfall illusion shimmered behind them and the familiar, sterile hum of the retreat enveloped them, she didn't head for her consoles. She walked straight to the large water tank and knelt, placing a hand flat against the cool glass. The Milotic within glided over, pressing its forehead to the other side. No words were exchanged. Naruto felt the faintest ripple of something, a communication that bypassed language entirely, a transfer of stress, of relief, of unspoken burdens. Cynthia closed her eyes for a long moment, her shoulders dropping a fraction. Then she stood, the champion's mask settling back into place, but it seemed more brittle now, more transparent. "The Zatu's feather," she said, turning to him. Her voice was back to its clinical precision. "May I see it?" Naruto pulled it from his jacket. In the clean, artificial light of the chamber, its beauty was even more pronounced. The purple and cream strands seemed to shift like oil on water, and it glowed with a soft, internal luminescence. Cynthia took it not with the reverence of a collector, but with the focused care of a scientist handling a volatile isotope. She carried it to a shallow, stone basin filled with impossibly clear water that sat on a pedestal beside her most ancient-looking tomes. "This is a tear pool," she explained, her voice low. "The water is perpetually purified by a deep, mineral spring. It has minor reflective and conductive properties for certain energies." She laid the feather gently on the water's surface. It didn't sink. It floated, and its psychic sheen intensified, casting intricate, dancing patterns of light on the cavern's ceiling, not random, but forming fleeting, geometric shapes and runes. She didn't consult a machine. She simply watched the patterns, her lips moving slightly, as if reading a text only she could decipher. After a full minute, she let out a slow, controlled breath. The Zadu saw a fork in the river of time. She murmured the words not for him, but for the recording she was undoubtedly making in her mind. One path leads to a sky bleached of color, of thought, of life. A silent, geometric world. The geometrized triumphant. She looked at Naruto, her gaze piercing. The other path is shrouded in storm clouds and orange fire. It is turbulent, painful, full of conflict and screaming will. But within that storm, there is a single, unwavering point of light. A refusal to be unmade. Her eyes met his, and for a flicker, he saw not the champion, but the woman who had just read a prophecy in a pool of water. It gave you the feather because, in its moment of ultimate agony, you were that refusal. You did not offer it a gentle peace. You offered it a fortress. That is what it saw in your possible future, a fortress against the silent nothing. She retrieved the feather, drying it meticulously with a soft cloth before handing it back. Keep it close. In the hands of a skilled psychic, it could be a powerful focus. For you, it may help anchor your will when the storm comes. It is a lens for your chaos. He took it back, the weight of her words settling on him heavier than any weapon. He wasn't just a tool or a variable anymore. He was a possible future. A fork in the road for an entire world. The loneliness of it was a physical pressure in his chest. What now? He asked, his own voice sounding rough in the quiet chamber. No, Cynthia said, moving to her main console with renewed grim energy. We stop reacting and begin constructing. Girasol's brazen field test proves the human element in this crisis is aggressive and accelerating. We cannot wait for the geometrized's next pulse. We must take the initiative. She brought up a complex topological map of Sinnoh, centering on Mount Coronet. The temple was the lock's mechanism. The key, however, lies elsewhere. In 3 places, to be precise. Holographic markers glowed at 3 distant points on the map: a stark, icy peak in the north labeled Iceberg Ruins, a vast, misty lake to the east, Lake Acuity, and a strange, twisted tower of rock on an island to the southwest, Iron Island Ruined Castle. The Triad of Balance, Cynthia explained. The hologram zoomed in on each location in sequence. Before the lock was built, ancient civilizations used 3 artifacts to commune with and calm the powers that would become the guardians. The icicle crown of the north, attuned to clarity, dreams, and purity of purpose. The mist veil of Lake Acuity, attuned to emotion, intuition, and empathic connection. The sandstone scepter of the ruined castle, attuned to will, physical reality, and enacted change. She zoomed back out, showing the triangle they formed on the map. Together, they formed a harmonic circuit that could negotiate with beings like Cresselia and Darkrai, and persuade a force like Regigigas to act. She pointed to the hologram of the broken scripture pillar. The lock used the principles of the triad, crystallized into unknown scripture. With the pillar shattered, we cannot recreate the lock directly. But if we can retrieve the original artifacts, we may be able to use them to perform a temporary reharmonization. A patch, to stabilize the tear long enough to find a permanent solution. Or, her gaze flicked to him, speculative and unsettling. To create a new kind of lock, using a different source of power as the binding agent. The unspoken meaning hung in the air, colder than the iceberg ruins, using you. Using your will as the core. But the artifacts are lost? Naruto guessed, trying to steer the conversation to practicalities. Not lost. Guarded. Cynthia's expression was grim. Time and catastrophe have a way of turning sanctuaries into strongholds. The icicle crown is deep within the heart of the iceberg ruins, a cave system now ruled by powerful, territorial ice-type Pokemon, and likely watched by remnants of Team Galactic who still fetishize the spatial and temporal deities. The mist veil is said to rest at the bottom of Lake Acuity, protected by Uxie, the being of knowledge, a legendary who guards secrets and erases the memory of those who approach with impure intent. The sandstone scepter is in the most straightforward, and perhaps most dangerous, location, the ruined castle, a place saturated with aggressive ghost and steel-type Pokemon, and a favorite hunting ground for rogue treasure hunters and corporate excavation teams. 3 trials. 3 different kinds of peril. Naruto felt a familiar, grim determination kindle in his gut. This was a mission. Clear objectives, hostile territory, a tangible goal. It was a language he understood. We split up, he said immediately, the shinobi in him assessing logistics. Cover more ground. You take 1, I take 1, and we meet at the 3rd. Cynthia shook her head, a firm, final motion. Absolutely not. You are an unknown element with a destabilizing energy signature and no knowledge of this world's ecosystems, Pokemon behaviors, or social structures. Sending you alone into any of these locations would be a guaranteed catastrophe. You would either be killed, trigger an ecological disaster, or be captured by the wrong people. We go together. We retrieve them in sequence. It was a rebuke, logical and infuriating. The obstacle was his own profound ignorance, her necessary control. But the desire to act, to move towards a solution, was a fire in his blood. Then which one first? He pressed. Cynthia studied the map, her fingers tracing the glowing lines. Lake Acuity. Uxie's test is one of spirit and intent, not raw power. If we can prove our purpose is pure, it may grant us the mist veil willingly, or at least guide us. It is the least physically perilous, and the most informative. She gave him a measuring look. It is also the one where your direct methodology will be the most counterproductive. Uxie cannot be fought. It can only be understood. Or it will make you forget why you ever came. Naruto scowled. Another test of patience. More talking, more subtlety, more of the quiet, maddening work he was so ill-suited for. And if it doesn't like what it sees in me? Then it will erase your memory of this place, of me, of your mission, Cynthia said with brutal honesty. You will wander out of the lake as a blank slate, and I will be left to face 2 remaining trials and a world-ending threat alone. The consequence of failure is not death, but oblivion. A different kind of erasure. The risk of the decision to go was immense. To lay his very self, his memories, his purpose, on the line. Fine. Naruto gritted out. When do we leave? At first light. We will travel to the foot of the lake by conventional means, a train to Snowpoint City, then a hike. No flying. Your energy signature, even dampened, is still distinctive. We must avoid aerial patrols and wild Pokemon attracted to anomalies. She began inputting commands into her console. I will prepare cold weather gear and supplies. You should rest. And practice. She gestured to the feather in his hand. Hold it. Try to meditate. Not to control your chakra, but to listen to its rhythm through the feather's filter. The calmer your inner storm appears to an empath, the clearer our intent will be to Uxie. She dismissed him. Naruto retreated to his room, the feather held tightly. He sat on the floor, back against the wall, and tried to do as she said. He closed his eyes, focusing inward. It was a mess. The Ninetales chakra was a broiling, resentful ocean beneath his own. His personal chakra was a turbulent river, churning with frustration, loneliness, and a desperate need to fix what he'd broken. He tried to impose calm, but it was like trying to smooth a stormy sea with his hands. He opened his eyes, frustrated. He looked at the feather. On a whim, he held it up before his face, focusing not on his own energy, but on the feather's gentle, psychic glow. He tried to match his breathing to its soft, almost imperceptible pulse. Slowly, incrementally, the frantic noise in his mind quieted. Not to silence, but to a manageable din. The feather didn't change his energy. It gave him a point of focus outside of its chaos. It was a lifeline of calm in his personal storm. A soft knock at his open door frame made him look up. Cynthia stood there, holding a small, lacquered box. I underestimated the difficulty of the task I set you, she said, her voice less formal than usual. She entered and sat cross-legged on the floor opposite him, setting the box between them. Meditation is a skill built over years. You have the discipline of a warrior, but not of a monk. This may help. She opened the box. Inside, on a bed of black velvet, lay 6 smooth, river-worn stones, each a different, muted color: gray, blue, green, red, brown, and pale yellow. Elemental focus stones, she explained. They have been bathed in the pure, ambient energy of their respective Pokemon types for decades. They hold no active power, but they resonate with a specific clarity. She picked up the gray stone. This one is normal type. The essence of simplicity, of baseline existence. The blank page. Try holding it with the feather. Naruto took the smooth, cool stone in his other hand. The effect was subtle but immediate. The normal type stone felt null, empty, neutral. It didn't resonate with anything, and in its blankness, it provided a stable foundation. The feather's psychic whisper became clearer, more distinct against that quiet backdrop. His chakra, which had been flailing in all directions, seemed to settle onto that gray, stable plane. It didn't calm down, but it stopped thrashing. He let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. It's not control, Cynthia said, watching him closely. It's context. Your energy is a wild, powerful thing. Trying to cage it will only make it fight. But giving it a stable ground to stand upon, that it can accept. She looked at the other stones. In time, you may learn to use the others to channel specific aspects. The red stone for fiery, aggressive bursts, the blue for fluid movement, the green for enduring resilience. But for now, the gray is enough. It is the foundation of being without conflict. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the only sound the hum of the retreat and the distant trickle of water. The stark divide between them, her scholarly patience, his explosive action, felt narrower in this quiet, shared space. Why are you helping me like this? Naruto asked suddenly, the question blurting out before he could stop it. I'm the one who messed up your lock. I'm a problem. You could have just handed me over to your league, let them figure me out. Cynthia was silent for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. She traced the intricate pattern on the lacquered box with a fingertip. When I was a girl, she began, her voice distant, I was obsessed with myths. With the stories of how the world was made, of the ancient Pokemon who shaped it. I saw them as elegant equations, beautiful puzzles where every variable had a place. Becoming champion was a means to an end. It gave me the authority to pursue those puzzles in the field. She looked up, and her gray eyes held a vulnerability he hadn't seen before. I have faced many legendary Pokemon. I have calmed their rages, solved the mysteries of their ruins. I have always done so with preparation, with knowledge, with the right tools and the right Pokemon by my side. I believed that was the only way. That chaos was the enemy to be managed. She met his gaze. You are chaos personified, Uzumaki Naruto. You arrived with no warning, broke my careful containment, and wield a power that defies every system I understand. You should be the ultimate problem. And yet, she gestured to the feather in his hand, the stone. The Zatu, a creature of profound temporal insight, gifted you its trust. My Milotic sang for you. They see something in your chaos that my equations cannot capture. A heart, as you would crudely put it. A relentless, protective will that is not so different from the bond one share with my own partners, just expressed with the subtlety of a seismic event. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. You are a new piece of the oldest puzzle. And a champion does not turn away from a challenge, even one that arrives in an orange jacket. I help you because your fate is now tied to Sinoa's. And because, she added, her voice dropping, I am curious. I want to see what a shinobi's will can truly do. She stood, the moment of vulnerability passing like a shadow. Rest. We leave at dawn. The journey to Lake Acuity will test your patience more than your power. Be ready for cold, quiet, and the weight of your own thoughts. She left, taking the box of stones but leaving him the gray one. Naruto lay back on the floor, the feather in one hand, the smooth gray stone in the other. The warmth of trust, the cool solidity of foundation. 2 gifts from this world, one earned in fire, one given in guidance. He wasn't just a stranger anymore. He was a project. A partner in a desperate mission. A possible future. Outside the retreat, under a sky still scarred by the distant, silent air, a sleek, unmarked airship powered by silent engines settled into a stealth hover over the route north of Veilstone. Its sensors were tuned to a very specific, anomalous energy signature, a signature that had spiked briefly in the great marsh and then vanished. Inside, the man in the white lab coat studied a screen. The signature was faint, muffled by dampening fields, but it pointed north. Towards the snow. Follow the thermal trail of the northbound train, he said softly. But keep your distance. The champion is wary. We watch. We wait for the chaos to create an opening. In the quiet of his room, Naruto Uzumaki closed his eyes. Not to sleep, but to listen. To the whisper of the feather, to the silence of the stone, and to the strange, new rhythm of a world that had howled him into its heart. The first trial awaited at a lake that guarded memories. And he would have to walk into it not as a warrior, but as an open book. Chapter 6: The Lake That Forgets. The cold was a malevolent spirit. It didn't just bite, it gnawed. It seeped through the thick, insulated coat Cynthia had provided, needled at his exposed cheeks, and made each inhalation feel like swallowing shattered glass. The landscape around Lake Acuity was a study in sterile despair, an endless, rolling expanse of white broken only by the skeletal fingers of frozen pines and the vast, flat, ice-veined pain of the lake itself. The sky was a sheet of low, bruised cloud, leaching all color and depth from the world. The silence was absolute, a physical weight pressing against his eardrums, so profound it seemed to swallow sound before it could be born. It was the polar opposite of the marsh's teeming, noisy life. Here, everything felt muted, waiting, ancient. A tomb with a sky for a lid. Cynthia moved ahead of him on her snowshoes, a stark, dark silhouette against the blinding white, her breath pluming in the still, dead air. She hadn't spoken since they disembarked from the train at Snowpoint City's lonely outpost. The 3-hour hike through deepening snowdrifts had been a grueling exercise in endurance, and the oppressive quiet had given Naruto too much time to think. To feel the gray stone grow warm in his gloved grip, to sense the feather's gentle, psychic hum against his heart, and to wrestle with the coming test. A test he was uniquely, catastrophically ill-suited for. He was a creature of loud declarations, of visible, explosive action. Uxie, the being of knowledge who guarded the lake's depths, judged the heart, and erased the memory of the unworthy. How did you prove a pure intent to something that could perceive every selfish, violent, confused thought you'd ever had? How did you hide the Ninetales' seething, ancient hatred, or the churning frustration of his own exile? You couldn't. You could only offer it, naked and flawed, and hope it was enough. They reached the lake's edge. The ice was thick, clear in patches like flawed glass, revealing the dark, fathomless water beneath. In the very center of the lake, maybe a kilometer out, a small, rocky island jutted from the ice, crowned with a single, gnarled, ancient tree, its branches bare and black against the gray. The mist veil is said to rest in a cavern beneath that island, Cynthia said, her voice startling in the vacuum-like silence. It was flat, devoid of its usual analytical energy. She was apprehensive. Oxy dwells there. It will know we are here. The approach is the first test. We must walk. No chakra. No tricks of speed or stealth. Just walk. And in walking, contemplate why we have come. The ice reflects more than light. She stepped onto the ice. It groaned, a deep, resonant sound that echoed across the emptiness like the creak of a giant's bones. Naruto followed, his own snowshoes exchanged for spiked crampons that bit into the ice with a sound like cracking teeth. Each step was a deliberate, crunching punctuation in the quiet. As they moved away from the shore, the world seemed to close in further. The gray sky and white ice merged into a featureless, disorienting void. The only points of reference were Cynthia's back and the distant island, which never seemed to grow any closer. The cold intensified, becoming a psychic pressure as much as a physical one. Naruto felt his thoughts slow, grow heavy and dense, sinking to the bottom of his mind like stones. Memories surfaced, unbidden and unwelcome. The empty apartment after a long mission. The silence so loud it rang in his ears. The echo of his own footsteps, the only proof he existed. The Rasengan tearing through the skin of his own palm during training, the smell of ozone and his own blood, Kakashi's single visible eye holding not praise, but a quiet, weary disappointment. Sasuke's back, walking away into the lashing rain at the Valley of the End. The finality of it. Not the pain of the Chidori through his chest, but the colder, deeper ache of failure. Of being unable to reach the one person he'd sworn to save. Each memory was a shard of ice driven into his heart. They weren't his victories, his moments of triumph. They were his quiet hurts, his loneliness, his most profound flaws. The lake was pulling them to the surface, holding them up to the bleak light for examination. It was an emotional vivisection. He glanced at Cynthia. Her face was a pale mask, her eyes fixed ahead, but he saw a muscle jump in her jaw. She was undergoing her own trial. What memories did a champion hide? What failures, what doubts, what secret sorrows weighed on the woman who was supposed to have all the answers? The desire was clear: reach the island, prove his worth, retrieve the artifact. The obstacles were internal now, his own past, his volatile nature, the beast within. The risky decision was to keep walking, to let the lake pick him apart, and hope the core it found was solid. A sound began, faint at first, then growing, a low, crystalline chiming, like wind through a forest of frozen glass. It came from everywhere and nowhere. The ice beneath their feet began to glow with a soft, ethereal blue light, illuminating intricate, fractal patterns that spread out from their footsteps like frost flowers blooming in fast forward. It's beginning, Cynthia whispered, her voice strained. It's reading us. Our histories, our motivations, the architecture of our souls. Don't fight it. Fighting is an impurity. An admission of guilt. Naruto tried to relax, to open himself as he had with the melodic song. But this was no gentle melody. This was an interrogation. The chiming drilled into his mind, pulling at psychic threads. He saw her. Kaguya. The progenitor. The infinite, empty stare that saw him not as a person, but as a vessel, a temporary container in a war so old it had consumed its own meaning. The terror of being unmade not from life, but from self, from history, from ever having mattered at all. The ice blue light around his feet flickered, tinged with an angry, defiant orange. His chakra, reacting autonomically to the psychic invasion, began to leak out, a visible, agitated haze around him. The ice beneath him hissed, and tiny, hairline cracks radiated out like a spider's web. Naruto, Cynthia said, a sharp warning. Rein it in. You're showing it your fear, your anger. That is not your intent. Your intent must be louder than your history. He clenched his fists inside his gloves, focusing on the gray stone in his pocket, on the feather's warmth. I'm not here for me. I'm here to fix what I broke. To protect. He forced the mantra through the storm of rising memories. They were halfway to the island. The psychic pressure doubled. Not just memories now, but images. Possibilities. Fears given form. The geometrized pyramid hovering over a ruined Konoha, the beloved faces on the Hokage mountain dissolving into silent, geometric patterns. Order. Symmetry. Death. Himself, older, face hardened into something cruel, standing atop a mountain of defeated, blank-eyed Pokemon, the Nine-Tails chakra cloaking him like a coronation robe of fire. A conqueror. A destroyer who had traded one kind of loneliness for the absolute solitude of power. These weren't memories. They were his potential futures. The lake was showing him what he could become if his will curdled into selfishness, if his power was used for dominion instead of protection. It was showing him the monster he had always feared lived inside him. The orange haze around him intensified, crackling. The ice groaned more loudly. He was failing. He was showing Uxie a soul stained with pain, fear, and monstrous potential. Stop! Cynthia's voice cut through the chaos in his head. She had halted, turning to face him. Her own eyes were bright with unshed tears, her composure cracked. The lake was doing its work on her, too. You're thinking like a shinobi. You're trying to withstand the test. To endure the torture. That's not purity. That's stubbornness. What then? He gasped, the mental pressure of ice around his temples. Accept it, she said, her voice fierce, raw. Accept that you are flawed. That you are afraid. That you carry a monster. Don't hide it. Offer it up. Your intent isn't to be perfect. It's to try. To protect despite the flaws, because of them. Show it that your will is stronger than your wounds. Her words were a lifeline in the frozen sea of his doubt. Perfection wasn't the requirement. Purpose was. Naruto stopped fighting. He stopped trying to shove the painful memories and dark fears back into the locked boxes of his mind. He opened his eyes, staring into the featureless gray sky, and let it all wash over him, the loneliness, the Nine-Tails' hatred, the fear of becoming a destroyer, the bone-deep guilt over the temple. He didn't cloak it in bravado. He didn't justify it. He just held it out. In his mind's eye, he offered these broken, ugly, authentic parts of himself to the chiming, probing presence, not as weapons, not as secrets, but as facts. As the fuel for his decision. This is what I am, he thought, directing the notion into the crystalline awareness surrounding him. And because I am this, I know what it's like to be seen as a monster. I know what it's like to have your existence be a problem. I can't let that silent thing out there do that to your entire world. I won't let another, me, be created on a planetary scale. He thought of the Zatter's pain in the marsh. Of the Milotic's unconditional song. Of Cynthia, burdened and brilliant, walking into the cold with him. I'm here to help. That's it. That's all. It was simple. Childish even. But it was the unvarnished core of him, stripped of all complicated shinobi politics and tragic destiny. The angry orange haze around him didn't vanish. It changed. It softened, blending with the ice-blue light of the lake, creating a shimmering, aurora-like effect around his feet. The conflicting energies didn't cancel. They wove together into a new, stable pattern. The cracks in the ice stopped spreading. The psychic pressure lifted. The chiming faded to a single, clear, approving note that hung in the air like a struck bell. Cynthia let out a shuddering breath. She gave him a look he couldn't decipher, part awe, part exhaustion, part something else entirely. You did it, she murmured. You passed the approach. They reached the island. The rocky shore was slick with black ice. The ancient tree was not dead. Up close, he could see it was a species of evergreen he didn't recognize, its needles a deep, resilient blue-black, holding on to life in the harshest of places. At its roots was a dark opening, a cave leading down into the heart of the stone. They entered. The cave was not cold. It was warm, humid, and filled with a soft, golden light that seemed to emanate from the very walls. The air smelled of ozone and old parchment, of secrets kept and wisdom forgotten. The passage descended in a smooth, natural spiral. At the bottom, they emerged into a cavern that stole Naruto's breath. The walls were not stone, but solidified memory. Frozen within clear, crystalline structures were countless scenes, ancient humans in furs tending to strange Pokemon, titanic battles under different stars, the careful placement of the first temple stones. It was a library of Sinnoh's soul, written in light and time. In the center, on a simple pedestal of water-smooth stone, lay the mist veil. It was ethereal, seeming to be made of condensed mist and captured starlight, constantly shifting, never holding one form. It hovered just above the stone, whispering of intuition and deep emotion. And floating just above the pedestal, its large, yellow eyes closed, was Uxie. It was small, delicate, with a yellow, crescent-shaped head from which two red, gem-like tails extended. It didn't move. It seemed to be in a state of profound meditation. Cynthia approached slowly, her steps reverent. She bowed from the waist, a gesture of deep respect. Guardian of knowledge. We come with humility. We seek the mist veil not for power, but to mend a fracture in the world. To silence a hunger that would consume all memory, all thought, all feeling. Uxie's eyes did not open. But a voice spoke in their minds, genderless, ageless, and clear as the lake ice. The one who breaks has been judged. The voice was directed squarely at Naruto. His will is a tangled forest. His past is a storm. His soul shares its house with the primordial no. He is a walking contradiction. Naruto felt a fresh spike of panic but forced it down. He bowed too, clumsily. Yeah. That's me. And I'm sorry. For breaking things. I want to help fix it. Why? The single word held the weight of tectonic plates shifting. Naruto looked up, meeting the closed eyes of the legendary Pokemon. Because, in my world, I was a monster to a lot of people. Just for existing. I know what it's like when the world looks at you and sees something to be feared, or locked away, or erased. That thing up the mountain, it looks at everything that way. At your whole, messy, beautiful, living world. And I can't let something like that win. Even if I'm part of the mess it wants to clean up. The silence in the cavern stretched. The crystalline memories in the walls pulsed with a slow, patient light. The geometric absence seeks to unwrite the story. Uxie's voice finally came. Your will is a new kind of ink. Chaotic. Unpredictable. Prone to tragic error. A pause that felt endless. But it is vehemently, stubbornly present. The veil may be used by one whose intent has been seen and accepted. One of Uxie's red tails lifted, pointing not at Cynthia, but directly at Naruto. Cynthia's breath hitched audibly. Guardian, the artifacts are meant to be used in concert by those who understand their harmonic principles. He has no training, no. Understanding is one path. Conviction is another. The lock was made with understanding. It is broken. A patch sewn with conviction may hold long enough for a new understanding to be forged. Uxie's form began to glow, growing translucent. Take the veil. The northern crown sleeps in anger. The western scepter is sought by greedy hands. Your time is shorter than you know. Remember, the lake does not forget. But it can choose what to erase. The glow intensified, and Uxie vanished, leaving behind only a fading sense of profound, watchful peace. The mist veil, now unattended, drifted gently from the pedestal. It floated across the cavern, not toward Cynthia, but toward Naruto. It settled over his outstretched hands. It had no weight. It felt like holding a cold breath, a captured sigh of the world. He could feel immense, latent psychic power within it, but it was dormant, waiting for a will to give it purpose. Cynthia stared at him, her face a conflict of professional frustration and dawning, unsettling hope. It chose you, she said, her voice hollow with disbelief. The artifact of intuition and emotion chose the chaotic vessel of a tailed beast over the region's foremost scholar of myths. She shook her head, a wry, utterly exhausted smile touching her lips. The equations continue to defy me. The variables have a will of their own. She stepped forward, not to take the veil, but to examine it as it lay in his hands. It is key to you now. I could not wield it even if I wished. Our path is set. We must retrieve the other two, and you must be the one to channel their power. She looked at him, the full, terrifying weight of the responsibility settling in her gaze. The risk just increased exponentially, Uzumaki Naruto. If your conviction wavers, if the storm inside you overcomes you when we try to wield the triad, the backlash won't just kill us. It could unravel the delicate energies we're trying to bind, accelerating the end. Naruto looked from the shimmering veil in his hands to her weary, resolute face. The consequence of passing the test was not relief, but a far greater burden. He hadn't just earned a tool. He had been anointed as the linchpin of a desperate, divine gamble. He carefully gathered the insubstantial veil, finding it could be folded into a small, cool bundle no larger than his palm, and tucked it into the most secure inner pocket of his coat, alongside the Zata's feather. The two artifacts lay against his chest, one warm with trust, one cool with purpose. As they ascended the spiral cave and emerged onto the icy island, the world felt different. The silence was no longer oppressive, but watchful. The gray sky held a promise, not a threat. But as they crunched back across the ice toward the distant shore, Naruto's sharpened senses, still riding the clarity of the trial, caught a flicker of movement. On the far shore, at the exact tree line where they had entered, a brief, sharp glint of reflected light, sun on glass, or a lens, before it vanished behind a snow-laden pine bough. They were not alone. Cynthia saw it too. Her posture stiffened, her hand going to a pokeball at her belt. We've been followed, she said, her voice low and dangerous. The quiet part of our journey is over. The race for the artifacts was on. And now, they had competition. Chapter 7, The Chase Through Snow. The pristine silence of the lakeshore was now a silent scream of tension. That single, predatory glint from the trees was a gunshot in the quiet. Cynthia didn't break into a run. Running on ice with crampons was a fool's gamble, a sure way to fall and break something vital. Instead, she moved with a sudden, liquid swiftness, angling their path not directly toward the shore, but toward a jagged outcropping of wind-scoured rock that clawed its way out of the ice 100 meters to their left. Don't look directly at them, she murmured, her voice barely a breath on the frozen air. Follow my pace. Exactly. Naruto matched her, his shinobi instincts syncing with her tactical precision. They were exposed on a flat, white plain. The rocks offered the only immediate cover. Every crunch of their crampons felt deafening, a betrayal. They reached the rocks, pressing their backs against the freezing stone. Cynthia peered around the edge, her gray eyes narrowed to slits. 2. Maybe 3. Professional winter gear. Not league issue. Not rangers. She pulled back. Girasol. They must have tracked us from the marsh. They're cautious. They saw us emerge from the cave and are waiting to see what we do next. We fight them, Naruto said immediately, chakra coiling in his gut like a waking serpent. A direct, clear enemy was a problem with a solution he understood. No. Cynthia's veto was absolute. Engagement is their goal. They want to capture you, or at least force a confrontation to gather more data on your power and take the artifact. A battle here would draw every wild Pokemon and patrol for miles. And it would waste time we do not have. She looked north, toward the distant, serrated peaks of the Alabaster Icelands, glowing faintly in the dull light. Our path lies there. To the iceberg ruins. We need to break contact and disappear. The desire was clear: evade, reach the next artifact. The obstacle was a trained, likely well-equipped team between them and their route, in terrain that favored ambush. The risky decision was to not fight, but to outmaneuver. So we go around, Naruto said. We go through, Cynthia corrected, a fierce, calculating light in her eyes. But not the way they expect. Lucario. She released her partner in a flash of red light. The fighting type landed silently on the ice, its aura sensors immediately active, its ears swiveling like radar dishes. Scout. Aura sight. Find their perimeter, numbers, watch pattern. Report back silently. Lucario nodded and vanished, not with a body flicker, but by leaping from rock to rock with impossible, soundless grace, its blue-gray fur blending into the stone and shadow. We wait, Cynthia said, settling into a low crouch. She pulled a small, handheld device from her pack, a sophisticated GPS and topographical map. The iceberg ruins are a 2-day trek from Snowpoint through the most brutal terrain Sinnoh has to offer. We cannot afford a prolonged chase. We need to lose them decisively, here and now. Naruto huddled against the rock, the cold seeping past his coat again. The mist veil in his pocket felt like a sliver of dry ice, its cool presence a stark contrast to the Zat of Feather's warmth. He focused on his breathing, on the gray stone in his other pocket, forcing the combat-ready chakra to settle into a low, ready simmer. 5 minutes later, Lucario reappeared as silently as a ghost. It made a series of precise gestures with its paws, a silent language Cynthia clearly understood. 3. She translated for Naruto. 2 forward scouts with binoculars and long-range comms, positioned in a blind 300 meters east of our original exit point. 1 sniper or spotter with a high-powered scope, elevated in a pine tree 500 meters south, covering the entire lake approach. They're good. They have the high ground and the angles. She chewed her lip, thinking. They're expecting us to either retreat back the way we came, which they cover, or make a break for Snowpoint, which is open ground for the first kilometer. They'll have a vehicle or aerial extraction waiting there. You have a Pokemon that can fly us out, right? Naruto asked, thinking of her Garchomp. In this visibility, with a sniper who likely has anti-air taser rounds or ice-based suppression, Garchomp would be a glowing, slow-moving target. No. She traced a line on her map with a gloved finger. There's a third option. The River of Tears. Naruto followed her finger. It was a thin, blue line snaking away from the western edge of Lake Acuity, plunging into a steep, forested gorge marked with topographical fury. A river? It'll be frozen solid. Not all of it. It's fed by geothermal springs. There are sections of open, turbulent water even in this cold. It's treacherous, unpredictable, and considered impassable without specialized equipment. Which is why they won't expect it. She looked at him. Can you run on water? The question, so absurd in this frozen wasteland, almost made him laugh. Yeah. It's a basic skill. Good. Because we won't have time for bridges. Lucario, create a diversion at the sniper's nest. Something subtle but convincing. A false aura signature, trigger a small ice fall. Draw his eye for 60 seconds. Then disengage and catch up to us at the river's head. Lucario nodded and was gone again. We move on my mark, Cynthia said, tightening her pack straps. Due west for 200 meters, then hard south along the lake's edge until we hit the river outflow. We'll be in the open for the first 200. Run as if your life depends on it. Because it does. They waited, 10 seconds stretching into a minute. Then, from the direction of the southern tree line, there was a sharp, echoing crack, like a massive branch shearing under the weight of ice, followed by a distant, startled shout. Now! They burst from behind the rocks. Naruto pushed chakra to his legs, not for a flicker, but for sustained, enhanced speed. He flew over the ice, his crampon scraping. Cynthia kept pace beside him, her movements a steady and powerful, efficient motion. They were 2 dark streaks on an infinite field of white. A second later, a thwump sound and a sharp ping as a projectile, a high-velocity, gel-based tranquilizer round, impacted the ice a meter to Naruto's left, sending up a geyser of frost. The sniper had recovered fast. Zigzag! Cynthia barked. They weaved. Another round hissed past Naruto's ear, close enough to hear the air part. The open stretch felt like miles. His heart hammered not from exertion, but from the primal, familiar thrill of being hunted. It was almost like home. They reached the relative cover of the lake's western bank, where wind-sculpted snowdrifts created a broken, shadowed terrain. The river outflow was ahead, a dark, steaming gash in the ice where violent, churning water fought its way to the surface, sending plumes of mist into the air. The contrast between the frozen lake and this furious, living water was jarring. "No stopping!" Cynthia yelled over the river's rising roar. She didn't break stride, launching herself from the ice bank onto a slick, half-submerged boulder in the river's center, then leaping to the next. Naruto followed, chakra adhering his feet to the wet, treacherous stone. The water was fast and black, sucking hungrily at the edges of the rocks. The geothermal heat made the air thick and sulphurous. Behind them, he heard shouts. The two forward scouts had given up stealth and were in pursuit, skimming across the ice on what looked like silent, motorized sleds. One of the scouts raised a device, a cylindrical launcher. There was a soft thud, and a net of weighted, conductive cables shot toward them. "Down!" Naruto shoved Cynthia forward behind a larger boulder. The net splashed into the raging water where they'd been, sizzling and sparking as its taser nodes shorted out. Cynthia popped up, a pokeball already in her hand. "Not on my watch! Spiritome, Will-O-Wisp! Target the sleds!" The keystone glowed, and the sinister cloud of eyes materialized. With a whispered command, it sent globes of ghostly purple fire not at the men, but at the engines of their sleek sleds. The flames passed through the metal as if it weren't there, causing no physical damage, but enveloping the machinery in an unnatural, soul-chilling frost. The sleds sputtered and died, momentum carrying the cursing scouts onto the rough ice. "Keep moving!" Cynthia recalled Spiritome, and jumped for the next stone. The river was narrowing, the gorge walls rising steeply on either side, coated in treacherous verglas. The path was becoming a cascading series of freezing waterfalls and boiling pools. Naruto's water walking held, but the technique was designed for calm surfaces. Here, the water was a maul. He had to constantly adjust, pouring more chakra into his soles to maintain grip against the violent suction and the slick, algae-covered rocks. A shadow passed overhead. He looked up. A sleek, unmarked tiltrotor aircraft, its engines silent in a stealth mode hover, was descending toward the gorge's rim, a winch already lowering a fourth operative, in tactical gear. "They've called in air support!" he shouted. Cynthia's face was a grimace of concentration and fury. "We need to get under cover. The ruins are in a glacial valley just beyond this gorge. There's an old ice cave network, the river goes underground." She pointed ahead where the river plunged into a yawning, dark mouth in the cliff face, half obscured by a massive, glittering curtain of icicles longer than a man. It looked like the entrance to a frozen dragon's maw. The operative on the winch opened fire, not with bullets, but with a wide-beamed sonic emitter. The air vibrated painfully. The sound wave hit the curtain of icicles above the cave entrance. With a series of deafening cracks that echoed like cannon fire, they broke free, a crystalline avalanche of spears plummeting toward the river, and toward Naruto and Cynthia. Time seemed to slow. The falling ice was a solid wall of death. The river offered no escape. The cave was too far. Naruto's decision was pure instinct, born of 1,000 life-or-death moments. He couldn't deflect it all. He couldn't outrun it. So he would go through. He grabbed Cynthia around the waist. "Hold on!" "What are you?" she started, but he was already moving. He didn't jump sideways. He jumped up, channeling a massive, desperate burst of chakra to his legs. He shot vertically toward the falling curtain of ice, directly into its path. "Rasengan!" He formed the whirling sphere not in his hand, but around them both, a desperate, expanding shell of violently rotating chakra. It wasn't an attack, it was a drill. A barrier. A spinning cocoon of defiant will. They met the avalanche. The world dissolved into a deafening, grinding roar of shattering ice. The Rasengan shell spun with furious energy, deflecting tons of frozen debris, carving a tunnel upward through the collapsing curtain. Shards the size of spears slammed against the whirling energy, and were flung aside like brittle straw. The force was immense, shaking Naruto to his core, draining his chakra at a terrifying rate. He felt Cynthia clinging to him, her face buried against his shoulder, her body rigid. For 3 eternal seconds, they were in the heart of the ice storm. Then they burst out the top, above the falling debris, arcing through the air in a glittering shower of diamond dust. Naruto's chakra was spent. The Rasengan winked out. They were falling, now directly in line with the dark cave mouth. He twisted in midair, putting his body beneath Cynthia's. Grab the ledge! The cave entrance rushed up at them. He slammed back first into the icy ledge at the cave's mouth, the impact driving the air from his lungs in a pained, explosive grunt. Cynthia scrambled, her gloves finding purchase on the rough ice. She hauled herself up, then turned and grabbed his jacket, pulling him onto the ledge beside her with a strength that belied her frame. They lay there, gasping, the thunder of the avalanche and the river echoing below. The tiltrotor, having pulled its operative up to avoid the ice fall, hovered impotently, unable to navigate into the narrow gorge or the low cave. They were in, but not safe. Naruto pushed himself up onto his elbows, his entire body a symphony of aches, his chakra reserves feeling hollowed out, scraped clean. Cynthia was already on her feet, staring back at the gorge entrance now partially blocked by a fresh, jagged mound of ice. She then turned to look at him, her expression unreadable in the dim blue light filtering through the ice. He expected a rebuke. For the reckless move, for the massive expenditure of power, for the risk. Instead, she simply said, "That was a viable tactical solution." The words were clinical, but her voice held a faint, undeniable tremor. She extended a hand to help him up. "Can you walk?" He took her hand, her grip firm and surprisingly warm. "Yeah. Just need a minute." "We don't have a minute. The cave is unstable, and they'll find another way in or collapse the entrance." She shouldered her pack, pulling out a high-powered flashlight. The beam cut through the absolute darkness of the tunnel, revealing walls of ancient, compressed ice that glowed with a faint, internal blue radiance. "The iceberg ruins are this way. We keep moving." As they began to jog down the frozen tunnel, the roar of the river fading behind them, Naruto realized two things. First, the mist veil in his pocket was no longer cold. It pulsed with a gentle, warm rhythm, in time with his slowing heartbeat, as if approving of the desperate, protective gambit. And second, as he ran behind the beam of Cynthia's light, he saw her reach up with her free hand and quickly, almost furtively, wipe at her cheek with the back of her glove. He couldn't tell if it was melted ice, or something else. Deep in the tunnel, ahead of them, something in the ice moved. A shadow, large and serpentine, coiled behind the frozen wall, following their progress with lidless, ancient eyes that reflected the flashlight's beam in 1,000, glittering points. The first artifact was secure. The second awaited in the heart of the ice. And the ruins, it seemed, were not as empty as Cynthia had hoped.